across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Really appreciate you joining me. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock, and whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company today. So much to talk about. I mean, as we've just been saying with JK, there are an awful lot of stories about today. I say this quite often, but wow, a lot to get to, and a lot of really, really important stuff as well. Don't forget, if you miss anything of the show, you can go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing, you lucky, lucky things. Coming up in this hour, Labour is standing accused of sabotaging the National Grooming Gangs inquiry by both victims and campaigners. Keir Starmer's long-promised inquiry 4 months ago, he finally got dragged kicking and screaming. The idea of having a national inquiry suffered a serious blow on Monday. 2 of the survivors of the grooming gangs quit the liaison panel and claimed they were being silenced, with one claiming that officials wanted to downplay the issue of the ethnicity and religious background of the perpetrators by basically making an inquiry into pretty much every kind of sexual abuse of children. We're going to be talking about that with the brilliant, the wonderful Maggie Oliver very soon. Also, in a win for common sense, the Metropolitan Police have said they will no longer investigate non-crime hate incidents to end the practice of officers having to police what they call toxic culture war debates. This after, of course, the comedian and writer Graham Linehan was told that he would face no further action yesterday after he was arrested by armed police at Heathrow Airport last month for 3 tweets about trans activists, one of which was quite plainly a joke. But key thing is, he hadn't committed a crime. Of course, he was never going to actually face proper charges, but they will still record those incidents. And of course, this is only the Met Police, just one of many police forces. We're going to be talking to Lord Young, the Conservative peer and founder of the Free Speech Union, about that in just a couple of moments. Plus, Prince Andrew, still in the news. He just won't go away. Crawl under the stone you came from, Prince Andrew. Oh, sorry. Andrew, Mr. Windsor. But Virginia Giuffre would have viewed Prince Andrew giving up his titles as a victory. That's what the ghostwriter of her memoir released today has said. The book, Nobody's Girl, was co-written by Amy Wallace, describes Ms. Giuffre's encounters with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, currently serving a 20-year term in American prison for her role, and, of course, more details about allegations about Prince Andrew, who, of course, has always denied not just having sex with her, but ever even meeting her. And then he paid her 12 million quid. Of course, that's what we all do with people we've never met. But anyway, all that coming up, lots more besides. I'm delighted to say, joining me throughout the show, although it's going to throw me all day because it's not a Thursday, it's Tuesday. Don't get confused and do the wrong thing today. But Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, is here. Morning to you.
Good morning to you.
We've had a bit of a flopsy around this week.
Today's not Thursday.
I know, but genuinely, it's like after bank holidays and you spend the whole week confused about what day of the week it is. Now, normally we would have a very long chat at this point, but we've swapped things around. Lots of things are changing today, and we're going to be talking to our first guest in just a couple of moments. But I would like to put a couple of questions to the audience first, and obviously we'll get your thoughts, Philip, in just a moment too. 2 questions I want to ask you today, because I think they are both so important. One, Labour is accused of sabotaging the National Grooming Gangs inquiry after 2 victims quit the liaison panel and claimed they were being silenced. What are your reaction to that? Also, your reaction to the Met Police saying they're going to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents. This after the Graham Linehan arrest for social media posts about trans activists. What's your reaction to that? Give us a call, whatever you want to say, and any other topic you want to talk about as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk and send your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. And you knew that bit already because I bore you with that once an hour. Anyway, I'm required to do so. I wouldn't do it otherwise, I promise you. So much to talk about. Let's get straight to it with my first guest. I'm delighted to be joined by Lord Young. He's Conservative peer and founder of the Free Speech Union and has been such a big player when it comes to trying to tackle so many of the issues regarding non-crime hate incidents and the like. Lord Young, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Julia.
I mean, look, good news yesterday that Graham Linehan, the comedy writer, was not going to face any further action for 3 tweets that he posted about trans activism, which were quite blatantly not illegal, quite blatantly not a crime, should never have been arrested, certainly not by armed officers at Heathrow as he got off a plane to attend another court hearing about something else entirely. But the outcry over this, particularly I think in America, seems to have created a moment where we've had a little bit of the madness has broken briefly into a moment of sanity from the Metropolitan Police. What's your reaction to their statement that they are no longer going to investigate, or they will continue to record such incidents?
Well, it's fantastic news, obviously. We were slightly astonished yesterday. The Free Speech Union had paid for Graham's legal defence team, found the lawyers, and we'd already succeeded in getting some of the absurdly onerous bail conditions imposed on Graham when he was released, but still under investigation following his arrest.
What were those conditions?
One was that he wasn't able to comment on the case. It was a gagging order. We got that lifted pretty quickly. But there was another, which was that he wasn't allowed to contact any of the quote-unquote victims. But of course there weren't any victims because he didn't name anyone in the 3 tweets he was under investigation for. They were just generally satirical, Mickey-taking tweets about trans rights activists. So that was pretty absurd. We managed to get that lifted. And then the Metropolitan Police announced that they were going to take no further action against him, i.e. they were dropping all charges. So that was fantastic news. Champagne corks already beginning to pop, but Free Speech Union headquarters. And then came the additional bonus, which we weren't expecting, that the Metropolitan Police have decided to no longer investigate reports of non-crime hate incidents. So that was fantastic news. And because the Met is the largest police force in the country, and because Sir Mark Rowley is one of the more influential leaders of the police, we hope that other police forces will now follow suit. And this could be the beginning of the end of NCHI, something the Free Speech Union and others have been campaigning against for over 5 years.
You and many of us campaigning against them, but I mean, even a former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, basically told the police some years back when she was in office, stop investigating non-crime hate incidents. There's a clue in the name. They're not crimes. They're not any of your sodding business or the police. We've got quite a lot of crimes that we'd like investigated: shoplifting, phone thefts, bike thefts, got burglary, rapes, murders. I mean, those perhaps take priority. And when you've solved all of those, even then, don't spend your time on non-crime hate incidents. They've carried on anyway. And the thing is, we only hear about a few high-profile cases, don't we? You know, Graham Linehan, well-known, much-loved comedy writer. It went viral on the internet, on front pages. But actually, this is happening on a huge scale. Give us an idea of just quite how many times this is happening and who it's happening to.
Well, there was a report in the Times earlier this year based on freedom of information requests submitted to every police force in the country, which revealed that over 12,000 people a year are being arrested by the police and investigated for committing just 2 possible speech offences online. I think it was the Malicious Communications Act and Section 127 of the Communications Act, and those 2 are only 2 of about a dozen speech offences you can be arrested for. But over 12,000 a year works out at over 30 a day. Yeah. So the scale of this is really quite staggering. I mean, it's far, far larger than any other country.
And it's not often people, well-known, famous names. It's ordinary people posting this. And I know that an awful lot of these do involve women and other people who would be men speaking out about trans activism, and a lot of this, these are being used as political tools in a bid to silence people because, well, you might not face criminal charges at the end, including Graham Linehan in this case, but what everyone always says, the process is the punishment.
Yeah. If you look back over the Free Speech Union's cases, we've fought now over 4,500 cases over the last 5.5+ years, and about 40% of them, 40% are women who've got into trouble because they've said they don't want to share lavatories with biological men, or don't think women should have to compete against biological men in women's sports.
What terrible bigots. What terrible, awful things for them to say. So basically, what would have been completely normal conversation and a view, 10 years ago, they're being investigated by the police. And again, police who should have better things to do. Do you think things change now? Because we know there are a lot of people who don't even know that they've got a non-crime hate incident even registered against them. They go to get a job as a teacher, a social worker, go to work with children, and then they find out that during the enhanced record checks, this flags up that they've got this hate incident recorded against them. Sometimes they don't even know about it.
Yeah, that is the really pernicious thing about NCHIs. I mean, the waste of police time is obviously a hugely important objection to them. The Policy Exchange published a report last November in which it revealed that the police are spending, in England and Wales alone, 60,000 hours a year investigating NCHI. So in the last 11 years, they were introduced in 2014. That's 660,000 police hours when, as you say, I think in the last 3 years, in 48 of the postcodes in England and Wales, not a single burglary was solved in the last 3 years. But the really pernicious thing about them is that they can show up. If you apply for a job as a teacher or a carer and you're required to do an enhanced DBS check, they can be disclosed as something on your criminal record, even though it's a non-crime hate incident, and stop you getting a job. And that's a breach of a fundamental principle of English common law and a bulwark of British liberty, which is that unless something is explicitly prohibited, then it's permitted. By definition, non-crime isn't explicitly prohibited, it's non-criminal.
They said the quiet bit out loud. But this is it. I mean, this comes into, the Online Safety Act, which is still a big issue. And, we get, won't there be a new definition of whatever Islamophobia is? And this is all about our speech being controlled, people being fearful of saying things they know or believe to be true, and then the police getting involved based on someone else's subjective view. And again, with a non-crime hate instance, the police have been asked to investigate whether or not there is a victim, whether or not the person who complains about it witnessed it, saw it, or had anything to do with it, was the subject of it. I mean, and just someone saying, but I thought it was a hate incident, that in itself can be recorded as a hate incident. That goes against every principle of justice.
Well, that's absolutely right. When Suella Braverman introduced her statutory amendment in 2023, she introduced that introduced a new code of practice that the police are expected to follow when it comes to the recording, which incidents to record at NCHIs. There is now a reasonableness standard, but it doesn't seem to have stopped the promiscuous recording of NCHIs. Actually, they've increased since 2023. So that's one of the reasons I welcome Mark Rowley's announcement that the Met are no longer going to be investigating them. But as you say, that's only part of the battle. The next thing we have to make sure happens is that NCHIs are non-disclosable in enhanced DBS checks, so they don't stop you from getting a job where an enhanced DBS check is required. I described this yesterday to the Free Speech Union staff as El Alamein, but not D-Day. We've still got quite a few battles to fight.
Absolutely. One battle that does appear to be over is at the Oxford Union. This, of course, is part of the, it's part of Oxford University, but not actually part of the university body. And it's the Oxford Union Society. And there's been a big row ever since the horrific murder of Charlie Kirk in the States, which was greeted by the president-elect of the Oxford Union, George Baronier, as a source of joy and amusement. And even though he debated this man one-on-one, face-to-face, some months earlier, he was taking pleasure in the murder of a young husband and father. I have to say, it was quite horrific. And I said at the time, I thought he was an appalling human being. He faced a vote of no confidence ahead of him even taking office next term. And we had a load of people voting. There was a big organisation of current members who were past members of the university being able to vote. There was a whole load of shenanigans going on over that vote, and accusations there'd been intimidation by people supporting this young man. But it's been announced this morning that the President-elect, George Baronier, has been ousted following outrage of his celebration of Charlie Kirk's shooting. You're a free speech campaigner, but part of free speech is, I suppose, being able to have a debate without wishing your opponent dead. Do you think it's right that he's been ousted?
I feel conflicted about this one, Julia. At the Free Speech Union, we quite often find ourselves defending people who've said something in a private WhatsApp chat, which is where the now ousted president-elect made his inflammatory, deeply unpleasant comments.
It wasn't very private. It was with a lot of other people.
It wasn't very private.
Yeah.
But we quite often find ourselves defending people on the other side of the culture war to this chap, but who've got into trouble for something they've said in a private WhatsApp group that's supposedly brought their employer into disrepute. And it's quite a nebulous, quite broad standard. And our general position is that social media policies should not be designed so broadly that they can be weaponized to get rid of people whose political opinions you disagree with, and they quite often are. We think that, well, first of all, there should be a statute of limitations on how far back the offence archaeologists can go to dig up stuff.
You've been a victim of that yourself.
I've been a victim of that myself. But we also think that unless the institution can show tangible harm, that its reputation has actually been tangibly harmed in a provable way, then people should not be losing their jobs, not placed under investigation by university authorities for things they've said in chat groups, often late at night and, when they've had a few wines. And he's quite young. I would have preferred it, I think, if he had resigned. Had he made a really fulsome apology, I think he'd be in a much stronger position now. His apology was a little bit mealy-mouthed.
Well, no, I face it, he defended what he had said. My view was we're allowed to judge him for the rest of our lives and rest of his. Can I ask you about one other thing? Because you were a massive campaigner against lockdowns during COVID. The former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is the latest senior figure to give evidence to the COVID inquiry, and this is the period when they're looking particularly at what happened to schools, what happened to children. He's been asked to react to what the former Education Secretary Gavin Williamson gave in his testimony last week to the inquiry. Basically said, look, there'll be no planning for schools to be closed. And again, I'm sure you and I both remember Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance telling us and showing us graphs about why there was no point closing schools during lockdown, during COVID, because it wasn't going to make much difference to closure, to the spread, But Boris Johnson tells the inquiry that it's clear the idea of closures was being discussed and planned for by SAGE, by the Cabinet, and he absolutely says there was planning for mass school closures and is clearly defending it. What's your response to that?
I think the closure of schools during the lockdown is absolutely indefensible. I tabled an amendment along with Graham Brady in the House of Lords last month to the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill to make it virtually impossible for schools to be closed in the event of something else like this happening. I think it was partly planned for, it was partly pressure being brought to bear on Boris and the Education Secretary by SAGE and by the government scientific advisors.
And the trade unions.
It was also, as you say, the teaching unions.
And by the way, lots of the media. I remember I assumed when I supported the first lockdown, which you always railed against, that they had new evidence. They didn't have new evidence, but I always opposed school closures. And we know from Sweden, don't we? Not a single child under the age of 16 missed a day of school. They have lower COVID and other deaths than us. Haven't got a wrecked economy and haven't got a wrecked health service.
There is literally zero evidence that closing schools in any way curbed the spread of infection of COVID-19. Julia, you may not know, but the Norwegian Prime Minister in 2020, shortly after closing schools, reopened them again and apologised to children and parents for having made such a colossal, catastrophic mistake. That's what I'd like to hear Boris say to the COVID inquiry.
I couldn't agree with you more. He's going to be giving evidence all morning. We're going to be talking about it a bit later. My blood will be boiling throughout the entire morning. Lord Young, Conservative peer, founder of the Free Speech Union, thank you so much for joining us. Must stress, I am also a member of the Free Speech Union. I'm a member. I don't know why anyone isn't, because I mean, it's just madness, given what the stuff that I care strongly about. It all relies on us having the ability to talk openly about it and not be cancelled for it. That is called free speech, and you need to protect it. End of. 10:21 is the time. Big thanks to Lord Young. Philip Ingram listening to all of that. Do you want to come back in just first of all on the online hate incidents? Are you hopeful that the Met Police Chief, he's the most senior police officer in the land, he's seen sense in this. The police have realised this doesn't help them when it's on the front pages. People are worried about burglary and violence and sexual assault, and they are really not, they don't care about a supposedly hurty message on X or Facebook.
Well, I'll be hopeful whenever we start to see more chief constables turning around and putting the same policy out. But every constable, every card-carrying police officer can make an independent decision.
Can they, though?
Well,
your sergeant tells you you've got to go and arrest this guy. You can't say, I don't think I want to. Come on.
But this is where this is a perfectly good incident, highlighting the fact that we may have a bigger rot across our police, because the value of our police being independent, not being armed, is the independence of each individual officer when they're sworn into, or they swear into the role of being a constable.
I think you're giving a cop out to the top cops.
The top cop. No, definitely not.
Because Graham Linehan says he's going to sue the police, and quite rightly. I mean, he ended up in hospital. He was so stressed out. Absolutely. Here's the thing. I want him to sue the backside off them. And then there's going to be, we are going to pay for the lawyers on both sides, because he'll win. Of course he will, he's banked to rights. We'll pay for the payout, we'll pay for all that. And no senior police officer will lose his or her job.
Yeah,
and that's what bothers me. We need these people, they need to know their job is on the line. If you push for an arrest with such flimsy evidence, you should lose your job.
If a top cop orders a police officer to turn around and go and arrest someone, that police officer in the office of constable turns around and says, I'm not comfortable with this boss, and is still ordered to go and do it, then that boss needs to be dealt with. Absolutely.
10:23 is the time. I do want to hear your thoughts on this, and also on the accusations sabotage of the national grooming gangs. We will get your calls just a little bit later, because I want to have a chat with Philip as well, and we're going to, by the way, talking to Maggie Oliver, the wonderful Maggie Oliver, on the grooming gangs issue a bit later in the show as well. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
and as you raise your gun to protect yourself or the people that are in the vicinity, you're worried that you're going to spend 3 to 5 years being investigated and ultimately being taken from your family and thrown in prison. It's a complete joke.
Yeah, that cannot be in your mind when you're thinking about how to protect your safety as the police officer, the safety of your colleagues, and the safety of the public. You cannot have that second thought, because that is going to delay and cloud your judgment. So I think it's quite an important intervention.
It's a sort of
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:27 is time. Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, still with me in the studio. We don't normally have a guest at 10 o'clock, so we didn't get a chance to have such a long chat, Philip, but lots to talk about. We talked about the non-crime hate incidents. We'll see, won't we, whether or not other police forces follow suit and whether we actually do get rid of them, and the recording of them and the disclosing of them. I mean, please, can you spend your time dealing with crimes, not non-crimes would be an idea.
Well, isn't there a crime of wasting police time? So if senior officers tell their constables to go and do this sort of non-crime stuff, they're wasting police time. And they're
But also, as we heard from Lord Young from the Free Speech Union, 40% of the cases they deal with involving these are involving, women being accused of transphobia, simply for pointing out that men aren't women and men shouldn't be in women's only spaces.
When I saw Graham's post that he got arrested for, where he talks about hit them in the testicles.
Trans women,
if someone who's identifying as a woman can be hit in the testicles, that is quite amusing.
It was literally the whole point. The whole point is, well, they couldn't possibly have
that's
those.
Quite amusing.
I mean, there we are. But this is the thing. But it's all subjective. But the point is, people who do make those complaints should be told you are wasting police time. If you make another complaint, you will be arrested yourself. That's what we need to do. We need to have the blowback. That's the crucial thing. Let's also talk about the allegation of sabotaging of the grooming gangs inquiry. Now, it took 4 months for the Prime Minister to finally be dragged kicking and screaming to agreeing to a national statutory grooming gangs inquiry, because the point was made that it can't be local councils investigating what happened in their own area, because we know that local councils were part of the cover-up of the grooming gangs. Now, we've seen yesterday 2 of the victims, now survivors, obviously Fiona Goddard and Ellie Reynolds. They both resigned very publicly from the victims' roles in the liaison panel, saying they were being silenced. They were part of the role of just helping to find a chair. 4 months, they haven't found a chair. These inquiries are always chaired by a top KC or a top judge, okay? And apparently the people they're looking at are people who are senior former social worker and a senior former police officer. So the 2 groups who are in authority, who are accused of being people, the organisations, which deliberately covered up the grooming gangs issue because they didn't want anyone to think they were racist or Islamophobic, because it was basically largely being perpetrated by Pakistani Muslim men. And they just... we'll just let all these white girls carrying on being raped and abused and beaten and tortured. Not a problem, because we don't want to be accused of being racist. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. And these girls, these former victims, girls, now women, of course, they basically said, look, we're being silenced. They're bringing in, they're looking at people who are totally the wrong fit for this inquiry. And yet again, I mean, this is dragging on again. We're talking about this. This has been going on for 20 years. It's still going on right now. Accusations that Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, is covering up what he knows about clear evidence that there are grooming gangs in London. Why wouldn't there also be grooming gangs in London? And nothing's happening. Why did they want it to go away so badly?
Well, the current government, we have to blame the previous government for not getting the inquiries going
absolutely.
then. But the current government wanted to go away so badly because a large proportion of the councils are Labour-run councils, and a large proportion of the seats for Westminster that the accusations are coming from are marginal seats for individuals that Labour think are stars or up-and-coming stars or important people in the party, and they don't want them to lose their seats. And
It's really that simple.
It's down to internal party
and here's the
politics.
thing, this ties in with the next one we just touched on, because we're going to talk to a guest in a moment, but Prince Andrew and all the allegations against him, you know, having sex with Virginia Giuffre when she was 17 years old, when she was being trafficked by his big mate Jeffrey Epstein, convicted, paedophile, teenage prostitute trafficker. Just he's denied any wrongdoing and then paid 12 million quid to the woman who claimed he'd had sex with her, even though it would have been totally legal in this country for him to have had sex with her. She was above the age of consent. But who hasn't? Surely you've paid 12 million quid out to someone you've not met. Surely.
Oh, frequently.
Okay, you've got to ask where the 12 million came from. Okay, because
no, you can't ask that.
Yeah, well, the Queen had to basically pay it because he hasn't got any money. Which is weird, because he's not been paying rent on Royal Lodge for 2 decades. But again, this is a story that the royals want to go away. The government everyone wants this story to go away as well, because it's all embarrassing. Because who knew what when? And one of my issues is, I think clearly Prince Andrew knew perfectly well what Jeffrey Epstein was. So did Sarah Ferguson, and they didn't care. I think there is a lot more stuff that's going to come out, and there's a lot more that's going to come out in these emails that are gradually coming out of America. There are so many other issues in terms of this. I couldn't care less whether he's got his title or hasn't got his title. I object to the fact he's apparently a very rich man who can afford to do goodness knows what and fly around the world, but can't afford to pay rent on a property which is owned by the Crown Estate, which is supposed to provide money to us, but also again, this is about a cover-up. This is about everyone just hoping it goes away because it's embarrassing. That is not how justice should be done.
Correct, it's not how justice should be done. And we've got one individual who's been grooming young people, who is being rightly vilified across the front pages, but we've got tens of people in marginal seats who are not being vilified and given the same sort of level of publicity, because one is a public figure and the others were part of grooming gangs. We've got double standards across the board here with everything that's going on, and a lot of those double standards are down to the press. The press should be hitting the government hard for covering up the grooming scandals in the same way that they're rightly hitting Prince Andrew, who everyone that I know who's met him has always said he is one of the most obnoxious individuals they've ever
Not
come
against
across.
the law being obnoxious.
No,
though.
it's not. But
that's how I've got away with it all these years.
He was unpleasant, obnoxious, and he
entitled.
More than entitled, and not like any of the other members of the royal family. I've met a lot of them, and they are lovely, and they're really nice. But the stories that come out about him, no. And he
this is
really,
true.
He really
I think there are
needs to
plenty
go
of people want to see him go. But again, it's he has denied any wrongdoing. He's not actually been accused of any crimes. But again, I don't see. This ain't going away. But the media aren't going to let it go now. And the public hate him. That is certainly the case. Look, I want to talk about that, and also about grooming gangs with a guest in just a couple of moments, a child safeguarding consultant and former detective, Jonathan Taylor. We'll take a quick break. I promise we will get your calls. We just got a bit of a topsy-turvy first hour. So do get in touch. Your thoughts on all the big stories we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:37 is the time. Let's talk about these grooming gangs and, well, the accusations that Labour is trying to sabotage the grooming gangs inquiry. Let's talk to Jonathan Taylor. He's a child safeguarding consultant and former detective, spent 15 years in child abuse investigations. Good morning to you, Jonathan.
Morning, Julia. Good to
very much appreciate you joining us. I mean, look, this is an incredible worry when two of the survivors of these grooming gangs have both chosen to resign very publicly from the liaison panel helping to decide the remit of this inquiry, but also crucially who chairs the inquiry. Does it surprise you that A, it's taken 4 months and they still haven't got a chair, and B, that they're looking at former senior police officers, former senior social workers to investigate how police and social workers and councils covered up a grooming gang scandal?
Yeah, to a degree. However, when you consider that obviously the previous inquiries, what's been said is there have been widespread systemic failures, and you can virtually look at every part of society, whether that's councils, police forces, NHS, churches, schools, etc. So therefore, who are you going to put in place?
Well, a senior judge would be the first choice, surely?
Yeah, but we also know that if you go back, if you've worked in this area, that there's been people from the legal side have also been part of this.
Yeah.
This is the problem we've got, Julia, that in fact it's so widespread that you will have anybody from any walk of life, any profession, who at some stage been involved. So you could use this. Now, what Fiona Goddard did say was quite right. How can we trust these people? Personally, I happen to know Jim Gamble, and I would say, I mean, there's two people that worked in this area. One was the former head of the Scotland Yard one, Peter Spindler. Peter Spindler and Jim Gamble, they headed up some massive inquiries in this, and I personally would say, I would put my trust behind them. But it's going to be very hard for any victim to say, well, we can't have police doing this. We can't have. I get that. I understand that. But the problem is, at the end of the day, you're going to have to put somebody in that
charge.
position.
But it's amazing it's taking so long. I mean, it's interesting thinking back to the Grenfell inquiry, and so many of the sort of campaigners objected to. I think it was Justice Morbick Smith, I think his name was. Apologies for forgetting his name. But he was basically a posh white man. He couldn't possibly understand. They ended up loving this guy, and he absolutely, really, really did them proud. So it is a bit unfair, to tarnish everyone with the same brush. But you can understand their concerns about, well, if you do ask questions of those who are the candidates, these are the sort of questions we expect you to ask. I would have thought these women, they can sodding well decide what questions they want to ask. The whole point is that they're not coming at it from a sort of a professional perspective. They're coming at it from the perspective of those who've actually been abused.
Yeah, well, that's going to be my next point. I think if you speak to Fiona and Eliane, that the fact is that if you look at these inquiries and where you would start it as a former detective, you're going to speak to the victims.
Yep.
They're the ones that you're going to go directly to. Forget all the councils, forget them. Let's speak to the victims. Let's get everything put in place. Exactly what happened, when, exactly. I mean, Maggie will be on later, and she'll say, you follow the evidence. We get the evidence from the victims, so deal with the victims first.
Yeah, and get their version. Well, the version of events which is going to be more likely to be the most accurate one. Well, Maggie Oliver, I mean, she's written a public letter, pointing out that, none of the victims and survivors that she pulled together to speak to Baroness Louise Casey when she did her sort of rapid review about whether or not there should be. It was basically the Prime Minister's get out. I was like, we're not having an inquiry. Oh, OK, we'll get Louise Casey to look at this, and she'll say we need to have one, and then we can change our mind and we've got cover for it. But Louise Casey's got a really, really strong track record of telling it like it is. And she met with these young women, and she was very, very, very clear, absolutely, there had to be a full inquiry. But none of the women who met with Baroness Casey have been invited to have any role whatsoever.
Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it takes so much courage for these victims of horrendous abuse, for them to come forward and actually sort of not hide behind anything. They want to be heard. That's why you go and speak to them, because You get the evidence, but you also get the passion, the fact that they need to be looked after, they need to be heard, they need to be listened to. And I just don't understand it. I mean, no wonder Fiona and Eliana said, look, we've lost faith in this.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's just about who's going to chair it, like that poison chalice, who's going to sit there. This is all about actually, well, hang on a minute, listen to us. We are the victims.
And this is the thing, though, isn't it? Because a lot of people are worried about, that this is an attempt to sabotage this inquiry. The Prime Minister didn't want to have one. He was kind of pushed into it by the big furore that Elon Musk picked up on a report about what was going on in the grooming gangs inquiry cases. We know the victims have been crying out for years, and people say, oh, well, people didn't know. Yeah, they did. Everyone sodding well knew. They just didn't want to do anything about it. It was all too difficult because too many people at senior levels were involved in the cover-up. And we know why there was a cover-up. There was a cover-up because people, lots of people who wanted to be woke, wanted to be nice, were felt a bit uncomfortable about the fact that the men involved in this were predominantly Pakistani Muslim men, and they were targeting predominantly white girls because they saw them as trash. This came out in evidence in court that this was how they viewed these girls. They were easy prey, they had no value, and that's what happened. Now, we all know that it's a white majority country. The majority of paedophiles and sex abusers in this country will be white men. We know that. However, there wasn't a deliberate policy to not prosecute and to not stop those men doing that in the way that there was with the Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs. And that is what the issue is. There was literally a decision made, by every level, loads of councils, loads of police forces, social care. Just keep it quiet. Community cohesion mattered more.
I totally agree.
So, is this why they want it to go away? Because, as Philip pointed out a little bit earlier, actually the majority of the places where this happened were Labour majority councils. They're up to their eyeballs in this, and everyone just wants it to go away.
Yeah, they're frightened of it. They're absolutely frightened of it, because who is it going to name? And it's going to be people, as we talked about right at the start, the systemic failures within councils, within police, within social services, all the people that should have been looking after these vulnerable children in society. And so, yeah, they're frightened of what's going to happen. And then you've got the councils, you've got the MPs as well. This is where a lot of votes will count. And it brings us up to date with where we're going with London. And, of course there's grooming gangs in London.
What a mystery, the capital of this city, 10 million people, and there's no grooming gangs at all.
There were grooming gangs when I was still at Scotland Yard. We were dealing with it. We had undercover officers. So why Mark Rowley's sort of going, well, I'm not certain about this. But, well, of course there are. There have been for many, many years. For the last 35 years I've been working in this area. I've known about them. You might not be able to sort of say, right, it's all British Pakistani men, but certainly that, of course, that's happening in London.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Can you explain to me, as somebody who was a former detective, looking at child abuse investigations, and I've got a good friend who is a detective, and she is dealing with victims of grooming gangs and trying to get evidence to when they can one day persuade these 16, 15, 14-year-old girls that they are victims of abuse. And so, when they're older and they realise these men are not their boyfriends and don't love them, and that they can actually bring these cases. I mean, absolutely heartbreaking stuff. The mindset of a social worker, a care home worker, a health worker in an emergency ward when a girl comes in clearly pregnant when she's underage, or a police officer, a councillor, whoever it is, the huge range of people in authority who should have been people who could be trusted to act for these girls. What could possibly be going through their minds when they're thinking, yeah, I'll just keep quiet? Because I know the urge, people didn't want to be accused of being racist. I would take that risk to safeguard a 13-year-old girl from being gang raped.
Yeah, I think there's a mixture here. Certainly in my time and the teams that I worked for, we didn't have this. I mean, Philip mentioned earlier that hopefully most police officers would be able to carry out their own inquiries, and that's exactly what we did. But if you now go to some smaller forces over the time, and I don't mean that in any detrimental effect, but if you've got smaller forces under pressure, and you're also going to have the political pressure coming in, because we didn't have that really in the Met. We were very autonomous in the sense that we could carry on their own inquiries.
Yeah.
So, but that's not, that sounds like I'm giving an excuse. It's not. There's no way in a million years a police officer or detective or social worker, if they have a vulnerable child come into an inquiry, you listen to that child. Yes, you then look at the evidence. And I totally agree with what some people said in the past, that Crown Prosecution Service would have come in and said there's not enough evidence to charge. Okay, but at least you've done the investigation. That's what we're crying out for, and that's exactly what Fiona and Eliane are saying now. We want an investigation directly aimed with the victims. What are we going to investigate? Where are we going with this?
Yeah.
So what goes through someone's mind? If there's pressure coming from above, I'm sorry, I would have acted. I would have said something. So it's a shame that hasn't happened in the past, but it could easily be that there was that pressure in some of the smaller forces. Now, GMP is not a small force, but of course, a lot of the little areas within it might be that that's where the pressure was.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, you're just that sort of your career's going to be over, and people, and then you see people like Maggie Oliver leave because to speak out. Can I also ask you about Virginia Giuffre, because sadly, took her own life earlier this year, as often happens, sadly, to victims of this kind of abuse. But her book is now out, Nobody's Child, and basically, Nobody's Girl, so talking about, her experiences. Now, of course, Prince Andrew's always denied any wrongdoing. He's not been accused of any crimes in this country. But we certainly know that, given the millions that have been paid out by Jeffrey Epstein and his estate, that certainly, I mean, hundreds of women, possibly even thousands, were victims of his abuse. We had a caller yesterday, and it's really troubled me, actually, because she was saying, I mean, just look, this woman, she would have known to walk away. She knew what was going was wrong. She didn't walk away, and these other women would have known it was wrong. Same with these girls, 13, 14-year-old girls in Rochdale or Rotherham or wherever. They must have known that being handed round, 14, four men as old enough to be their fathers or grandfathers and being, anally raped was not normal. But they didn't walk away. Tell us why young girls, young women, young boys who are victims of this, why they don't.
Well, they're getting brought into it. And this, I mean, obviously, we know from Nobody's Girl and her memoirs that she was, unfortunately, a victim of sexual abuse from a very young age.
Yeah.
But of course, the reason they're getting brought into this because they're groomed, and the grooming process is one when it first starts that most victims will enjoy. You're talking about gifts, you're talking about compliments, you're talking about love. Then they suddenly realize that actually this isn't the case. And what we know from the memoirs is that there were a lot of threats to her family, that we know where your brother goes to school. Yeah. So now there's all this guilt trip. If you don't do this, we're going to, no one's going to believe you anyway. Yeah. Power struggle. And that's what the interesting thing is. You'll always hear from people like myself and Maggie, etc. It's about power. Yes, it's about sex and sexual exploitation, but it's about power. Yeah. And when that power is wielded like it is here, by these very powerful individuals, you're talking celebrities, you're talking
billionaire.
Yeah. Exactly. The money's going in there where they can't walk away. This is the problem. And it takes somebody very brave, like Virginia, like Fiona, like Eliane, to say, right, I'm going to get out of this, and I am going to say it, and I'm going to speak up about this. Absolutely. This takes bravery, but it's not as easy as what people think.
Absolutely. Jonathan Taylor, so appreciate you joining us. Thank you so very much indeed. Child safeguarding consultant, former detective. I'm going to get Philip Ingram's thoughts on this in just a couple of moments. Going to get to your calls as well. Give us a call. Let us know your thoughts, whether it's about the grooming gangs, the cover-up, and the sabotage that appears to be going on, and indeed the Met Police. Just one police force, but the largest one, saying they're going to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents after Graham Linehan was told he will not face any further action because he hadn't committed a crime. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get in touch. This is Talk.
gangs that clearly both of those institutions have let down endless victims of grooming gangs that are still going on. And this is not something that has happened only in the past. This is something that is still going on. Girls and possibly young boys as well, but certainly girls are being abused, they're being raped, they're being drugged. This is still going on.
And you know, I have to say this. I have to say this, and again, I salute your party in the work that you're doing on this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:53 is the time. Philip Ingram's still with me, former senior military intelligence officer. So we still need a shorter title for you. It's bad enough saying my name half the time. But
him over there.
Oi, yeah. Him over there in the pink jacket. Just come back in, if you would, on the grooming gangs and this claim of sabotage, because I have no doubt at all that is what's going on right now.
Certainly there's sabotage going on from a political perspective, because I don't know both candidates who are being run to head this. I do know Jim Gamble, and if Jim Gamble gets in,
and he was CEOPS.
He set up CEOPS, Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre.
We've had him on the show plenty of times.
He is one of the global renowned experts in child exploitation, and he's someone who is straighter than anything that I've ever known.
Oh well, they won't want him then.
Which is why he will scare the hell out of all of the politicians, all of the senior police officers.
You need someone who's going to tell it like it is. He isn't worried about a future job.
He will tell it exactly
not about getting in the right club or I
don't know Anne Hudson, so I can't comment on her, but I do know Jim, and Jim would be superb in that, and someone that would scare the politicians.
Well, otherwise, what's the point of having the inquiry? Well, let's go to your calls on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Herbie is called. He's in Harrow. Hello, Herbie. What do you want to say?
Well, good morning, Julia.
Morning.
Well, we need a woman on this inquiry. No, nothing other than a woman. And yourself could be a good promoter.
I've got to be, I mean, genuinely, if they haven't got anybody, I'm happy to do it. God knows I don't want to know the horrific details, but this is the thing. I do think you often get into this situation where people feel like they can't trust any man, which is terrible.
Well, it's true, but Julia, a woman will understand more than a man would about what these girls went through.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I think so. Sarah Putin will be an ideal candidate as well. We need somebody that's got... Sarah
Putin, you mean the reform?
Yeah. She speaks so she sees it, and I think it's somebody like that we need. Somebody that's not going to butter up and say, "Oh yeah, okay,"
I want somebody who genuinely doesn't care about getting a title or a peerage later on or anything like that. They literally just they've always got around. I mean, I would trust someone like Baroness Casey running it. I really would. But I think the idea is that it needs to be a senior judge, Casey, something like that. Herbie, thank you very much. I do think it's awful the idea that people think it has to be a woman. I think that we are in a place in society which is very sad there. Let me go to Ricky, who's also on the line in London. Ricky, you want to talk about non-crime hate incidents and why the police say they're no longer investigating them. Well, Met Police anyway.
Yeah, could I also just speak about the grooming?
Yes, please do.
If you'd humour me. Anyway, good morning, Julia. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning.
Okay, then. Regarding the non-crime hate incidents, Julia, nobody's noticed and nobody's pointed out that most of these are generally made against people with views on the right side of politics.
Funny that.
I mean, that's across the board, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, so that makes it politically motivated, which is in itself a crime. I think basically it's subjugation by the government and the establishment, to keep people with right views.
Well, it's the fact that, as Toby Young pointed out a little bit earlier, the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman basically said, look, stop doing this in 2023, and then there have been more of these investigations since then than before, which tells you something.
It's subjugation, Julia. I mean,
it's shutting us down. It's deliberately meant to shut people up.
Yeah. When have you ever give me one instance where someone with left-wing views have complained of a non-crime hate incident against them? Give me just one.
Yeah,
there isn't any. They don't exist.
You don't hear many of them, but mainly because this is a tool that's been used by, like, say, trans activists and those on the left to shut up people on the right, which is why, you know, we're right, you know, Lord Young at Free Speech Union, they try and defend people whether they agree with their views or not, as do I.
We're being shut up across the board, so this links nicely into the grooming gang scandal. We're being shut up. It will be a whitewash as we know it.
Yep.
We know what's going to happen. Nothing will come of it. I'll make this prediction now.
Yep.
All they're doing, because it is pandering to his Muslim voter base, which
and a woke white voter base as well.
Mostly the Muslim voter base, and they will. They're leaving Labour in droves. We've already got the independents. When there's enough of them, they will cast Labour aside like they never even existed, Julia. And it's all. I mean, even with Maccabi, and all this.
Yep.
I mean, there's a common denominator amongst all of them, isn't there? And we're still afraid to say it. You know, it's Islam and it's Muslims. And
I would say, genuinely, Vicky, I would say it is an extremist, too large a minority of extremist, ideological, radical Islamists in the Muslim community. I don't think the average person who is Muslim in this country wants to have all of this, you know, stuff and are not committing these crimes or defending them. But I do think we're going to have more people speaking out to be a louder voice on behalf of those who are not. But Ricky, I'm going to have to leave it there. You can hear the music already starting there, heading up to the top of the hour. Boris Johnson's giving evidence all morning at the COVID inquiry about it, justifying his usual nonsense about why it was okay to close schools and ruin children's lives, probably cost children's actual lives as well, given the mental health impact of that. My blood is going to be boiling just even looking at him, apart from the reports we're getting. We'll keep you up to date on all that and talk about it later in the show. We've got more detail, lots more coming up on all the big topics. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning and welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining me. If you've just missed the last hour, well, frankly, where have you been? I do expect a note from your mum, but don't forget you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about the National Grooming Gangs inquiry, the victims and campaigners accusing Labour of trying to sabotage the inquiry, the one they certainly didn't want, but Keir Starmer's long-promised inquiry suffered a serious blow, with two victims quitting a liaison panel claiming they've been silenced. One claiming officials wanted to downplay the ethnicity and religious background of the perpetrators, because that was a key part of the reason why the grooming gangs were not tackled for so many years, because the perpetrators were largely Pakistani Muslim, and it was all a little bit too difficult. We're also going to be talking about the COVID inquiry. The government went too far by limiting the amount of time people were allowed to spend outside during the COVID pandemic. That's what England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, told the COVID inquiry yesterday. Shame he didn't mention it at the time, eh? Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is giving evidence to the inquiry right now. As I said, my blood is already boiling. He's already defending things, actually hitting back at his old Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, who gave evidence last week saying, look, there was no plan to close the schools. They'd said, I remember very clearly a press conference in which we had the Chief Medical Officer, Chief Scientific Advisor saying they wouldn't close the schools because it wouldn't make any difference. But the Prime Minister is giving his usual nonsense, sitting there with his, frankly, his stupid hair, justifying the horrific damage he did to this country. I genuinely, you don't hate him enough. Seriously, you don't hate Boris Johnson enough, because when you're worried about your taxes going up and your energy bill and the problem we've got with mass immigration, legal and illegal right now, Boris Johnson is responsible for all of that. He's the one that trashed our economy through what he did in COVID. He is the one that welcomed in millions of people from abroad, despite having promised to take back control, get Brexit done in 2019. Seriously, you do not hate Boris Johnson enough for what he has done to this country, and his whole, oh, I didn't want to, oh, I didn't mean to, what could I do, shtick with his stupid hair doesn't wash. It simply doesn't wash. He's a fraud. He is an absolute, total and utter lying fraud. He did this to us because he was weak and hopeless. He didn't stand up to the, by the way, equally responsible mainstream media pushing for lockdowns. He didn't stand up to the medical advisors and everyone else. By the way, they're now saying, oh, we didn't want to do any of this. Well, in hindsight, they had all the information in March 2020 and they did it all anyway. They put masks on our kids for 8 hours a day. They had our kids out of school, missing years of education. They have damned our children mentally and physically and academically for decades. They have damned this country's economy for decades. They've damned our health service for decades. And they're all saying, oh, we didn't mean to. Sorry, you were in charge. It's on you. I'm not got a single minute for these people. I'm going to have to take a break to get over this. I am literally just seeing his face on the television. Just seeing his face on the television. I've got screens above me is enough. But anyway, we're also going to talk about NEETs. A load of people out of work. Oh, I wonder why that's happening. Oh, they're all claiming to be on the sick and disability claims. Also, Boris Johnson's fault. Do you want to have your say? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You know, if you're one of his mates, one of his many defenders, go on, Nadine. Go on, Nadine Dorries. Give us a call about why you still think he should be Prime Minister. I'd love to hear from you. Lots of stories I do want you to call in on, though. I mean, genuinely, I have such a visceral reaction to that man and his lies. I really, really do. We're also talking about the National Grooming Gang scandal and the whitewash of that and the attempt to basically sabotage it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'd also want to hear about non-crime hate incidents. The Met Police, biggest police force in the country, but still the only one now saying they will not be investigating non-crime hate incidents. This after Graham Linehan, the comedy writer, was told he wouldn't face any further action for social media posts against trans activists, which, by the way, were not remotely criminal, and no one with half a brain would have thought they were criminal. It's never going to be a criminal action. He's going to be suing the backside off them, quite rightly. We're going to pay the penalty for that. We'll pay for all the lawyers. We'll pay for the compensation. But no heads are going to roll. I want to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls the charge at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Right, Philip Ingram, I'm going to let you talk whatever you want to talk about in this section, because I'm genuinely still fuming. I'm on the TV.
Yeah,
I can't look at that man's face anymore.
Yeah, I've got something to do before you let me talk. Hang on, it's your dinner party list for Saturday, and I've just taken Boris's name off it.
He's not on the Christmas card list, I'll tell you that.
Well, that's the next list that I have to adjust.
It's done to our children.
So I think I've picked up that you're not a Boris fan.
Listen. We've actually got a dump. We've got a dump button. So this thing like, if someone libels someone or someone comes on air and just says horrible words and things, we can just you can sort of
15-second delay. Yes.
Genuinely, I'm absolutely genuinely not to swear during that was quite a feat. But I can tell you the off-air version would be very, very different.
Ted's finger was hovering. He was. I could see him going like that.
It's the justification. Here's the thing. You only have to go back. If you look at the COVID press conferences they gave in early March, every single thing that we know about COVID now, they said, and we knew in early March, and they did it anyway. When they locked down, and I supported the first lockdown for the first couple of months, because I assumed they had new information because they suddenly changed their stance, and they didn't. They lied. They lied.
Two things. They
should all be in prison. They should all be in prison.
The COVID inquiry is not going to achieve anything, and it's a complete and utter waste of time and money. And the one lesson that comes out of all of this is our politicians need to grow a pair of things that Graham said, that if a woman gets hit in them...
testicular objects.
Yes, it needs to grow something along those lines to be able to say, I got it wrong. And if our politicians would turn around every now and again and say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, then maybe they would go up in our esteem.
Yeah, but here's an idea. Maybe you shouldn't make massive policy decisions without any evidence, which is what they did.
Well, yes.
That's what they did. That's literally what they did. We know the reason why kids wore masks for 8 hours a day in school was because Nicola Sturgeon's done it. So we'll have to do it. I mean, that's not a good reason for putting masks on our children for 8 hours a day.
All of this is down to, and it's come out, a lack of planning for school closure, so a lack of planning. And we've got a current government...
Well, they weren't planning for it because they weren't going to do it because it was a stupid thing to do and it wasn't part of our pandemic plan.
Our politicians need to learn to plan. The value is not necessarily in following the plan, it's going through the process.
No, there was a plan and we ignored the plan. And you know who followed the plan? Sweden. Sweden followed the plan, and which is why they had fewer COVID deaths overall. They had fewer other deaths. They didn't trash their economy. Children didn't lose their education. They didn't close down their healthcare service. Life carried on. Relatively normal.
They've got a good, healthy outdoor lifestyle as well.
Yeah. Anyway, and breathe. Right.
What else is going on?
No, well, this is the thing. I mean, this is the thing. It's kind of like it's in the past. Move on. But actually, it's kind of what happened in that period has had such long-term ramifications for trust in the police, trust in government, trust in science, children's education, mental health, physical health, our welfare claimants, our national debt. It's literally every single aspect of our life now that we are concerned about is as a result of that period.
And this is why I'm so concerned that the COVID inquiry is not going to achieve anything, because one of the single biggest threats to our security, to our future as a human race, is what the World Health Organization refer to as Disease X. It's the next pandemic that's coming through.
Yes, it's going to come out of China because America is funding China to do this sort of stupid research.
If we haven't looked at the practical lessons, then
can I just say,
we're not prepared
also a bit concerned about the old asteroid.
Well,
no, it's going to hit. I'm just saying. And on that note, on a Tuesday morning, no, but that's the reality.
No, it's not in the next hour.
Not today. Otherwise, let's carry on normal. But here's the thing: let's make life good until then. Another inquiry that's nothing good is going to come out of, the grooming gangs inquiry, forced on the Prime Minister. Absolutely. I mean, thanks Elon Musk for that. We have a problem in this country with grooming gangs. We have a problem with people covering up grooming gangs because they don't want to be called a racist because they were largely Pakistani Muslim who were targeting white girls. For that very specific reason, they were white. They were therefore worthless. We have now seen 4 months on. We were talking about on the show a lot, was it a week or two ago? Like, it's 4 months. What's happened? Now we know one of the reasons why they've not been able to find anybody is they can't find somebody who everyone will agree with, they can trust. Fiona Goddard and Eliane Reynolds are two of the survivors of of these grooming gangs who have brought cases. They have both quit in the last couple of days from the liaison panel, basically saying, look, we're being silenced, we're being told what questions we can ask of potential chair, and basically they're trying to whitewash it by trying to extend it to any sort of gang groups and not this particular style. But the key thing here is, yes, of course there's other grooming that goes on, and of course, this happened in schools, and there are, of course, the majority of perpetrators in a white country will be white men. Of course they will be. But the key thing here was that these men were not challenged, they were not arrested, it was not stopped because of their ethnicity and their religion.
Yeah, and this was systematic, and the cover-ups go through all local society and go higher. And this is where you need someone who, as you've said, is not worried about getting a gong out of it, not worried about their longer-term career, who will do a good job, who is not going to be influenced by other things. And as I said, of the two candidates, Jim would fit that completely. And one of our callers raised concern, said, no, it needs to be a woman because they can relate to the victims, the children.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
No, Jim has dealt with children who've been victims through his position with CEOP for many, many years.
CEOP, what it is.
CEOP is the Child Exploitation Online Protection Centre. So a lot of the grooming starts online. Yeah. And what we see with the international paedophile rings and all the rest of it, Jim has been central to gathering the evidence.
He knows how they operate. He's one of the good ones.
He's one of the very good ones.
Yeah, well, my view is if the victims aren't happy, you say, we're going to talk to Maggie Oliver, who's a crucial whistleblower on this, and in Manchester. I think, if Maggie ain't happy with them, I'm not happy with them. Yeah. I'm willing to take her lead on this. But it all depends
what they've been briefed on these two individuals.
Yeah,
because,
absolutely.
I do know Jim. I don't know Anne, unfortunately, so I can't comment on her.
Let's also talk about non-crime hate incidents, because again, police not investigating 13-year-olds turning up at A&E pregnant and beaten, and girls disappearing for 3 or 4 days from a care home because they'd been groomed. I mean, not investigating that, but they had been investigating non-crime hate incidents, some 30 a day. At one point it was 60 a day of non-crime hate incidents, but a huge number of those are basically trans activists making claims about online posts and the like. Now, after the issue of the arrest and the decision not to take any further action with Graham Linehan, the Met Police have said they're going to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents. They will continue to record them, but of course they can still be basically used against someone if they apply to work with children or with vulnerable people, work with a teacher, a social worker, a care home. They will then be stopped from working. Well, you've got a hate incident against you, so I'm afraid you may not have known about it, you may not have been investigated for it, but you have. This is still a big issue, isn't it?
It's a huge issue. And I just want to read a tweet out to you that's come to you and me from Bessie, who says, I was a police officer for 30 years. I can say with 100% certainty that all of us, if asked to deal with a non-crime hate incident, would have looked at the request and said, are you on something? You're joking, aren't you? Or something a little bit more swearing.
They can say that. But given that, I mean, people like, my friend Alison Pearce at the Telegraph and many others, so many people have been investigated. Now, hers actually was an alleged crime as well. But again, we're talking about hurty words on online posts. Now, the reality is, this is going on a grand scale. Most of the people this happens to either A, don't know about it. I put in a request for a subject access request. I was suggested to me by a free speech campaigners. You should put in a request and find out if you've got a non-crime hate incident against you. And we were all rather surprised to learn I didn't, because frankly, I don't know what I've been doing with my time if I don't have one.
I know.
Exactly, but I wouldn't know. And this is the thing. So, but people often don't know, and it's usually people. Again, they just They just said they're a woman, and 40% of cases of free speech union are taken up. They're just a woman who says, no, I don't want men in the toilet or in the changing rooms. I mean, these are not crimes or non-crimes. They are perfectly reasonably held legal views.
Yeah, and this is highlighting a problem at the top of our police. Someone who gets promoted up to senior levels in the police and up to chief constable or commissioner and all the rest of it should be turning around to those that are putting the political pressure, because this is coming in from political pressure, nowhere else.
Yeah.
And to all of these little groups, and turning around and saying, no, we're not dealing with it. We're police officers. We're dealing with proper crime. And if it crosses the line, we will deal with it. But for all of these things, no, go away. And the senior officers should be telling the politicians to go away and these groups to go away and protecting the more junior officers.
And again, my thing is, we end up paying for the compensation. We end up paying for it. No heads ever roll. Yeah. But again, I disagree with you. I do feel sorry for the junior police officers who are told go and deal with this. I mean, half of them don't even know what the law is, for goodness sake. Can I say this ties in? I mean, Robert Jenrick was on the Breakfast Show earlier, the Shadow Justice Secretary. Basically, Tories are claiming that the government is going to allow the early release of thousands of violent criminals and rapists, having said that they would not be early release of these people. Now, again, I don't understand why anybody serves anything less than if you're sentenced to a year, you're sentenced to 5 years or 10 years. I don't care what it is. You should serve every single day of that. People say, oh, people shouldn't be let off, should be let off early for good behaviour. No, you serve extra time if there isn't good behaviour, would be the simpler thing. Maybe we'll allow 10%. 10% is enough of an incentive for someone to behave well to get out sooner. But now it's down to people basically barely even, there's threats to Nigel Farage from that asylum seeker, asylum seeker, be kidding, illegal migrant. He's going to serve 5 years sentence. He's going to serve 18 months behind bars. Then he's going to be out on the streets, going to be paying for his hotel. I mean, the government was saying, we won't allow people who could perpetrated domestic abuse or sexual assault. But actually, a lot of violent criminals, they've not been done for a domestic abuse case, but actually they've been done for an assault, which and it doesn't count. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it is the fault of the Tories, though, for not they sentence people for longer. They improved low sentences. But that they didn't build enough prisons.
Didn't build enough prisons, didn't come up with a policy.
I do feel sorry for Labour on this, but nevertheless, there must be a better solution.
But there is a better solution. Anyone who's a non-Brit, you take them out and you send them off to their own country and say, your problem, and you get rid of them. So,
but this is the thing.
All the foreigners.
We know, 1 in 8 people behind bars is...
Why should we as taxpayers pay for them? Just because
because I don't want someone who comes in here from another country to commit a rape and then be set free back to Albania.
Yeah, but if we've got the right diplomatic relations with Albania and with the majority countries,
prison.
They will be in prison in there. And I
want them to serve their full time.
And again, if they don't do that, we turn around to those countries and say, "I'm sorry, we're not going to allow any of your citizens to come to this country."
Interesting
Full
point.
Stop.
Interesting point. No,
stop visas.
Yeah, if you don't want to play, we're really not bothered about coming to Albania or Pakistan. But you might be bothered about coming here.
Exactly. And Brexit gives us the ability, now that we supposedly control our borders, which we don't, to deny people... choose not to, but to deny people coming in.
Yeah. But
so
again,
we're not part of Schengen.
But there is an issue. I mean, I do think, and Labour are quite right to point out, that the Tories left this massive mess.
They did, but that's no excuse for not dealing with it.
Yeah. Well, you can only build prisons so quickly. I just think an awful lot of people who are in the later stages of lower level offending, put them again. Those prison camps. Let's put them. Those prison camps. Sorry, those military camps that are not being used. Well, let's put them there.
Well, we want those for the asylum seekers.
Oh, and goodness knows how many people are going to put those.
Migrants and all the rest of it.
So, let's just talk about Prince Andrew once again as well. Lots of allegations about his involvement with Virginia Giuffre. He's never actually faced a criminal allegation, so not in this country. Virginia Giuffre now sadly took her own life in April. Her autobiography, Nobody's Girl, published with a ghostwriter as of today. Obviously, excerpts have been out already. Now, her family members and her co-author say that Andrew being forced to give up his titles would be a victory, including losing the prince. Discussions about whether or not there should be the necessary act of Parliament. One line, basically, suggestion. I think the SNP, many other MPs are suggesting this. It's interesting, actually, the suggestion is also you can strip Peter Mandelson of his peerage as well. I'm all in favour. But we now know that, accusations Prince Andrew's team hired internet trolls to try and tarnish Giuffre's name after she accused him of having sex with her when she was being trafficked. He was deemed a security threat by the security services because he had far too many close links with a Chinese businessman who was regarded as a spy. We also now know he's not paid any rent for 20 years on Royal Lodge. Previously, the Queen Mother used to live. He's paid a peppercorn. He literally doesn't have to pay a penny. But there's lots of other questions about where his money comes from. When he paid off 12 million quid to Virginia Giuffre, 10 million to her, 2 million to charity, that money was largely apparently from the Queen. Well, what did the Queen think it was for? And what did her staff tell her? I've got issues over that. Whereas Prince Andrew and Ferguson, they never met a dodgy billionaire they didn't like, let's be honest. They had this sort of, was it a £10 million ski lodge in Switzerland or something, which they then had to sell off. they've been living the life of Riley.
Yep.
He hasn't had a formal job for quite a few years.
Yep.
And even before then, he wasn't paid anything enough to come close to the lifestyle that he leads, even with no rent. But also, crucially, this Royal Lodge is part of the Crown Estate. He's been given a freebie, massive, massive mansion to live in. Not paying rent, even though the Crown Estate is managed on behalf of the British public. They're supposed to charge rent and make sure that it makes money for because the public end up paying. So we've been subsidising this guy's rent.
Crown Estate is slightly more difficult in that it raises money for the Crown. A big percentage of that money for the Crown goes to into the Exchequer, and therefore it's taken away from the King, and therefore that pays for the royal family and all the rest of it. So yes, we are paying for it, but it's minute compared to the rest of the stuff.
But I think most people right now struggling to pay their rent and their mortgage will find it a bit sodding rich. That this very rich prince apparently didn't have to pay a penny for a mansion.
I'm more concerned about what he's got up to and what he's getting away with potentially and allegedly,
and what he knew,
and those that
There's
are around him.
There's no way he didn't know what Jeffrey Epstein was up to, because it was blatantly obvious at all times to anyone else.
And again, there's stories of Sarah Ferguson having gone to meet Jeffrey Epstein. There's stories of them taking their children to the what the actual
after he'd been convicted.
Correct.
After he'd been convicted
and then the links to so many other people, and that's what needs to come out. And we need to get into a society where it's not going to go away at all, and it shouldn't go away.
But him sort of becoming Mr. Andrew Windsor or whatever, losing his title, pushed out of his house, that doesn't make it go away. He's still the King's brother. He's still the late Queen's son, and he's still closely linked. And again, it's very interesting that the two names that have most emerged in these Epstein files that have been gradually, slowly leaked from American government, they have been involved. Peter Mandelson, a Brit, Prince Andrew, a Brit. Why is that?
The cynic in me turns around and says because it's coming out as part of books that are released in the United States, and you put those names in there and it creates more clickbait and it sells more books. So there's a very cynical approach to it. Might there be cover-up of some of the more senior Americans who might have got involved in it as well, where they're using their wealth and everything else to try and keep things hidden, and it's very easy then to find other nations' victims or perpetrators and throw them out to be your victim.
I have never been a conspiracy theorist on any topic whatsoever, and always just say to people, no, you're quite wrong. But if there's one thing I know for sure, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself in prison.
Exactly.
There's just no way in the world. A man who'd beaten it every single time. He'd managed to get away with it the last time. He'd been getting away with it for years. He had very important friends. He was a multi-billionaire. There's no way in the world that man thought the game was up. He hadn't even been convicted at that point of the huge raft of crimes that did get brought.
And therefore there's so many more powerful people.
Not a chance in the world. And who are the people behind that? But there we go. Got lots of calls on the board. Can't wait to get to those. We found a caller, Dave, who apparently hates Boris Johnson more than I do. That's quite a feat, Dave. I'm going to ask you to prove that in a few moments. Love to hear your thoughts on non-crime hate incidents being dropped as investigations by the Met Police, not by anyone else, just the Met, but they'll still record them, but also the sabotage of the grooming gangs inquiry, and anything else you want to talk about as well. Do get in touch. This is Talk.
clearly, both of those institutions have let down endless victims of grooming gangs that are still going on. And this is not something that has happened only in the past. This is something that is still going on. Girls and possibly young boys as well, but certainly girls are being abused, they're being raped, they're being drugged. This is still going on.
And you know, I have to say this. I have to say this, and again, I salute your party in the work that you're doing on this. And as you raise
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:29 is the time, and got a lot of calls on the board. It's interesting, sorry, I'm a little bit of a rant about Boris Johnson giving evidence to the COVID inquiry, justifying everything. Oh, what a shame, we didn't want to close schools for kids, but we did it anyway. And I'm genuinely saying you just don't hate him enough. You just don't hate him enough for what he did to us and our kids. But apparently I found two people who do hate him even more than I do. Quite a feat. Dave is on the line and he's called up on 0344 499 1000 from Southend. Hello, Dave. What do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia. I've had to have a tablet to calm my nerves down, and the hate I have for this man, the hate I have for the government, the hate I have for the general public for being so stupid, for going along with this man, is off the scale. Every time I see Boris Johnson, you have no idea. Well, your producer knows how I feel about him, and I can't say what I want to say. But this man is
I assume because of naughty words, but here's the thing. You say the general public.
My job. Let me, if you please. I lost a fantastic job at the height of my age, when it's difficult to get a job. There is ageism in this, because I couldn't get a decent job after I lost my job.
What job did you have?
I had a job at Gatwick. I worked at Gatwick Airport on the ramp. It was a fantastic job. You couldn't believe what a wonderful job it was. The atmosphere was great, and it was for whatever time I had left. Yeah. I lost that just along with millions of other people, while all those dirtbags who sit there and justify how wonderful it is. Well, those people who got paid their wages to sit on their fat backsides, try doing it with no wages coming in for 2 years plus. Try doing that. I had to get a job doing. I had to go private, being a private worker behind the scenes at the NHS, and you have got no idea, Julia, what was going on behind the scenes at the NHS. It was a farce, an absolute farce.
What do you mean by that?
People have lost their jobs. What about people who lost their businesses? They lost their houses. Some people committed suicide because they lost everything they fought for because of this odious cracking of a man and the government. We had people that were telling him not to do it, and that was Carl Hennigan, Professor Gupta.
Senator Gupta,
there were people telling him the opposite of what not to do.
Yeah, well, exactly. Just following the pandemic plan. Look, you say like the general public. I was one of the people who wasn't calling for a lockdown. I certainly always said schools shouldn't be closed. There was no evidence for that. But I supported the first couple of months of the first lockdown because I thought because they'd been opposed to lockdown and then they changed their minds that actually they knew what they were doing. I genuinely thought there was new evidence, but that was just a complete lie. They just buckled to the pressure from the media, and which was created by their own propaganda telling us we were all going to die when they never knew that and they never thought that.
Well, tell me this, Julia. Tell me this. How would you feel? I never had the vaccine, and I went out and bought myself a £5 card that says don't ask for whatever. I'm not wearing a mask. I never wore a mask. I never wore a mask behind the scenes at the NHS. And what I saw, I could tell you things. I could tell it. But you tell me, how would you feel with no wages for 2 years plus? You tell me, Julia, how would you and Mr. Ingram sitting there and your producers and all those fruitcakes out there that thought it was a wonderful time?
But I can tell you, we were fighting against this, from very early on. not early enough, and I've always held my hands up to that because again, I'll never trust governments again because of what the absolute blatant lies and the Chris Whitties and the Patrick Vallances. Genuinely, I think that people should be charged with crimes because they had a duty in public office and they lied to us, and I'm genuinely still appalled by that. But I completely understand, and I know lots of people who still to this day say, oh, well, we had a wonderful time during lockdown. I go, yeah, okay, so maybe you did, and your kid had lessons, and you had a big house, and you had money, but lots of other people didn't, and people lost their jobs, and their kids were at home having mental health problems and all of that, or they had cancer treatment that was cancelled, and they always say, but we had a lovely time, and you kind of have to give up at that point. But I still, at the end of the day, there was one man who was Prime Minister, and I held him responsible. He's giving evidence justifying himself right now. Dave, I completely understand, mate. I understand the pain. I understand not having been through that. I know I was in work every day, but I absolutely feel it for you. My God, we did try to give a voice to people like you during that time. We really did. Dave, thank you, and I'm just so sorry that happened to you. Paul is in Southampton, also wants to have his say quickly. What do you want to say, my love?
Oh, I love that. Johnson, absolutely despise him. That man has wrecked this country, same as Blair and the same as what Starmer's doing. There has to be some sort of vengeance for the government, for the country, for what he's done.
Well, he was voted. I mean, he was ousted from government.
Well, yeah, not quick enough.
True.
He just didn't do anything apart from his wife wanted, which was net zero. He didn't do Brexit.
He's an empty vessel.
He never secured our borders.
He's an empty vessel. He didn't believe in anything that he's ever said. Not a single thing.
No. And and Starmer is now getting away with, he's now swanning off because there's repercussions about the rape gangs, and don't get me started on that.
Yeah.
But there has to be a system in place where these ministers must be made accountability for what they've done.
Yeah, well, that's what the COVID inquiry is supposed to do. But given they spend more time worrying about rude words sent in COVID WhatsApp groups rather than, what was the evidence for you to do? Oh, we didn't want to close the schools, but we had to. Well, Sweden didn't close the schools, and they didn't have any more spread than us. They had fewer COVID deaths, fewer children damaged, and no one says to them. But the evidence was clear at the time that you didn't need to do it, but you did it anyway. No one says that.
Yeah, and he gives the impression he's supposed to be an intelligent man.
What a waste of those school fees, eh? What a waste.
Well, yeah, but see, Blair, the time bombs that Blair has dropped and are exploding amongst us now.
Yeah.
Why has that man not been brought to book? And Starmer, they should know that there's something in place that will hold them accountable for what they've done.
I completely agree with you. I really, really do. I mean, history will not be kind to any of those men, I'm pretty sure. Paul, so appreciate your call, and to Dave's as well. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:38 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight to my next guest, Trevor Kavanagh. He's former political editor of The Sun and joins us now. A very good morning to you, Trevor.
Hi, Julia.
I have to say, I mean, the show has been, there's lots to talk about. It's turned into a bit of a Boris Johnson hate fest. If you want to put your tuppence worth in on that, you're very welcome. But mostly, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we are with this grooming gang inquiry, which was still, I mean, dragged kicking and screaming by basically the media and Elon Musk and Reform to hold a grooming gangs inquiry. And 4 months on, we still don't have a chair. Now we've had two of the victims, the survivors of grooming gang rapists, basically resign, saying they're basically being silenced and they're not being listened to, and they're worried that the whole thing is basically going to be a whitewash. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's disgusting, it's despicable, it's shameful, and I think it's predictable. That's the problem. We've known about these appalling attacks on young girls, vulnerable young white girls, by mainly Pakistani gangs, which are still going on across the country, and in London, where Mayor Khan claims they're not going on at all. And this has been going on for 10, 20 years. And people have known about it all that time. This has not sprung out over the last couple of 3 years since the inquiry. They've known and they've covered it up. And as a result, thousands, maybe thousands of young girls, many of them in situations where they had no defense really against these monsters, have been vilely abused and treated like worse than animals. I mean, it's just eye-wateringly horrible, this description of what's happened.
I mean, some of the details read out in Parliament, actually, by Katie Lamb, about a girl being branded, literally branded with a hot iron as the possession of one of these men. I mean, it's so appalling and so awful, and the fact that it went on for so long and is still going on, and there is still this urge to cover up. Look, we know why they want to sabotage it and cover it up and make it white. They're politically correct reasons. Well, most perpetrators of abuse must be white because we're in a majority white country. Yes, but we don't have a policy of deliberately letting those people carry on their crimes because we're worried about, diversity and cultural and community cohesion. But also because a lot of the cover-up was happening in areas which were run by Labour councils.
No, not just Labour councils either. And this is blowing up in Keir Starmer's face it's almost as if he's walking through a minefield of self-inflicted disasters here.
Yeah.
One explosion after another. China, the list is just endless. But this one is a particularly vile one because so many young girls who were in fact due to be protected, entitled to be protected, were treated like rubbish by as I say, mostly Pakistani Muslim gangs. I delete the word Muslim because you can't use that, but most of them come from Muslim cultures.
Yeah.
And the simple fact is that...
But what's the issue? If that's what they were, and the attitude was that these girls that they were abusing were fair, they were just easy fodder because they were not Muslim, because they were white.
Yes, and it's also because Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are running scared of the Muslim vote, which is now increasingly powerful in the north in particular.
And we're seeing that with the Maccabi Tel Aviv issue with the Aston Villa match, and how much this has been an issue, and it's been quite an issue in Parliament. I mean, some very strong words from the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, towards one Labour MP, basically, I suppose, telling it like it is.
Sorry about that. Yes, I think that this is, coming alongside the rape gangs and Gaza, these two factors have propelled this right to the front of the political agenda. And it's all entangled with immigration, which is right at the top of the debate. And this government is trying to bring in, although struggling at the same time, Islamophobic laws. So you need a special law for what? For the Muslim community. Why? There's no need for a special law for Sikhs and Hindus and Chinese and any other nationality. Yeah. And the reason that there is an alleged irrational fear of Islam is because so many of the atrocities that have been committed in this country, including the white rape gang, white gangs, gangs raping white girls have been committed by Muslims. The atrocities in the Manchester arena, the stabbing of the girls at a concert. These are carried out not by Sikhs, Hindus, or Chinese. They're carried out by people from a culture where hatred is built into their interpretation of the Quran.
Well, now here's the thing. And again, people, I'm just not being PC, but look, I've got Muslim friends. People always get told off that I've got this friend or that friend. But the reality is, the vast majority of Muslims living around the world are not part of this sort of hate culture, not committing terror attacks. Well, we do have a minority, but it is a very, very large minority. It involves hundreds of thousands of people in this country who follow a radical political ideology of Islamism, of basically a fascist, extremist, radical ideology, similar to, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iranian. It is Al-Qaeda. It is a dangerous ideology. I believe it has no place in our country. I don't believe it has any place in the Middle East. And indeed, many of these, these views, that's where they come from. But it is very important that we do separate, law-abiding people just getting up and going to work, driving their cars, picking their kids up from school, living an ordinary life, who also happen to be Muslim, whether immigrant, come here as immigrants themselves or the children of immigrants, and people who come here or have been born here who want to impose radical Islam on our country. Those are two different groups of people.
And they're very big groups too. I mean, I'm talking, Indonesia doesn't have these sort of things. It's a Muslim country, one of the biggest in the world, and nor do many other countries. This has come from the Middle East. This has come from Wahhabism, the sort of desert Arab interpretation of the Quran. And it is a brutal interpretation. But the problem with the Quran is that it is immutable, and they have no pope who says, now, these verses cannot be acceptable in the modern age. They are all acceptable because they are the word of the Prophet Muhammad. And therefore, when an imam stands up in a mosque in Britain and preaches a vile interpretation of a particular series of verses and hidaths, the congregation, if that's what they're called, the worshippers, have to accept his interpretation.
And we have seen what most of us would regard as hate preachers in many mosques, and people being radicalised, and it is certainly a massive concern. I mean, in terms of
in prisons.
It's a massive issue in prisons. I mean, certainly we've got a report from the Policy Exchange think tank saying an official definition of Islamophobia, which is what a working group has been looking at, chaired by, weirdly, the former Tory Attorney General Dominic Grieve, set up by Angela Rayner when she was Deputy PM. But it risks undermining the UK's counter-terrorism strategy, because a fixed definition will mean that activists can use it to challenge counter-terrorism laws. It would undermine the Prevent programme, and it will actually be a bigger issue than what we've got right now. Now, people should be prosecuted for anti-Muslim hatred. If you're targeting people for abuse or incitement of or threats to somebody because of their religion, I don't care what the religion is, you absolutely should face prosecution. However, we're looking at an interpretation that means it's almost any criticism of the beliefs, the religion, or anything at all, or the clothing. I mean, conversations about banning the burqa today. Reform have talked about it. We've now got Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, in favour of banning the burqa. I've long been in favour of banning the burqa, as many Western liberal democracies in Europe have already done. I think it's a no-brainer we should do it. But you get into very difficult territory there.
But it shouldn't be difficult, because I think, in fact, that the idea of a law protecting Muslims under Islamophobic law is bad for moderate Muslims. I think Muslims themselves should oppose this law. And I think they should shout out loudly that we don't want this. We want action to stop terrorism in our name. That would be extremely helpful.
More Muslims killed than anyone else by extremist radical Islamic terrorists than anyone else. That's the thing. Trevor Kavanagh, thank you so much. Really interesting to talk to you, former political editor of The Sun. Thank you for that. Philip Ingram, where do you stand? I mean, banning the burqas back in the news with the Shadow Justice Secretary calling for it?
I think we allow too many things that undermine the very cultural identity of being British, and I don't think that that people should be in a position where their culture, their family, or anything else bans the burqa and allows the burqa or the niqab. And in the same way, any face covering.
I don't want to sit next to someone in a restaurant or on a train wearing a balaclava.
Well, exactly.
I'm constantly on the tube with these young men who apparently are terribly worried about COVID. So they've got their hoodies on and they've got their face masks on. Yeah, I know why you're covering your face, lads.
It's because the CCTV's everywhere and they're up to no good. And again, I've no problems with people wearing different hair coverings and all the rest of it.
I don't want children in school being allowed. I think the French route is by the far.
Children shouldn't be forced to do it and everything else. But we have to recognise that nuns wear hair coverings, so religious people can wear hair coverings for all religious means.
Covering your hair is completely different to covering your face.
Correct.
The niqab and the burqa are an abomination
they're oppressive.
to Western democracy, to having any role in society. You can't smile at them. You can have no interaction. There's an absolute abomination. I mean, I've actually spoken to phone-ins in a previous station. Lots of young women who insist that it's their choice to wear it. It's like, but if you're told basically you're a whore if you don't wear it, then Also, the message that a woman who wears a burqa says to a woman who's not wearing a burqa is, rape her over there. Literally the attitude in the Middle East, and if you've not spent any time in the Middle East, trust me, is, but if a woman is covered up, then she's protected. If she's not, she's fair game. That is a major cultural issue. And so when a woman wears it here, they are also sending a message to other women, which I think is very, very offensive. But, again, it's not an illiberal attitude. France, Belgium, loads of
countries
Portugal's now pushing for it.
Across Europe are doing it. Italy's doing it.
It is strange that most Muslim countries do not have burqa or niqab, and indeed they're actually banned in some Muslim countries, which tells you everything. It's nothing to do with Islam. It's complete. It's just a medieval garb to subjugate women, and I don't know why anyone's got any other opinion on that, because frankly you're not paying attention if you do. 11:50 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk about why we have so many young people not in work, education or training. It's going to go up to 1 million very soon, and an awful lot of those people are claiming they are off on the sick with a disability. We're going to talk to Justin Urquhart-Stewart about that. Up next, this is Talk.
your gun to protect.
We're going to select a random family, give them billions of pounds, 7 palaces and castles. They'll live for free. They'll get first-class lifestyles forever. They'll holiday in the world's most luxurious locations, and then their kids will inherit the whole thing and it will start over again. They will want for nothing, ever. In exchange, they'll wave the flag for the country, press the flesh with a few world leaders, hold some banquets. Oh, and they'll get paid for all of this, by the way. No one would vote for that.
Clear.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:54 is the time. Justin Urquhart-Stewart joins us now, economist and chairman of the Regionally Investment Platform. Good morning to you, Justin.
Good morning, Julia.
As always, we've yapped too long. I've yapped too long and we're running late. But I want to talk about NEETs, not in education, employment or trading. We're up to almost 1 million, about to pass the 1 million mark, according to a new think tank report. And a lot of them are basically claiming they're on the sick.
And this issue here is a classic issue saying, it's my right, I'm entitled to this. Well, hang on, if you've got a right, you also have obligations. Your obligation is to participate and go out and do something. And I'm afraid when people say, but there aren't any jobs around here, well, funny enough, you go somewhere else and you go and find jobs. And yes, I was hoping to go to university and get a better job. In the meantime, you'll be on a building site and whatever work that has to be. I'm afraid I'm not being silly about it. That's what I had to go and do because I didn't have any money.
I would love to see you on a building site. Did you wear your red braces?
Well, no, you weren't called Justin, you're called John, and Urquhart-Stewart doesn't get on terrible either, so it's just John Stewart. But I did end up getting elected as shop steward for UCAT, the Union of Construction and Allied Technical Trades.
Did you?
I did joined-up writing, so that made it a bit easier.
This is a wonderful insight. I wish we had longer. But the reality is, look, this is going back to levels we haven't seen for more than a decade. And an awful lot of young people just got out of the habit of work. They got out of the habit, frankly, of leaving the sodding house during COVID. Boris Johnson's still on my television screen, justifying what he did to young people during lockdowns and COVID. But the Resolution Foundation say the young are becoming increasingly detached from the workplace. But even when they do get a job, they're often working from home anyway.
Well, that's the issue, but you have to therefore make sure there's some discipline behind this. Yes, you're entitled to something, but not everything continuously. You have to go out and go and find some work. So after a while, whatever benefit you were getting, it runs out. It's not just a never-ending pot that goes through. And if people say that's unfair, well, I'm sorry, we've only got a certain amount of money, and so therefore you've used up your bit now. I'm afraid I do not get this idea that I have to actually get a job round the corner. Dear old, as we remember, a certain Conservative minister, on your bike, and that's exactly what you have to try and do.
I can remember in 2011 when we had those riots in London. I remember, I think David Lammy coming on my show at the time. He was MP for Tottenham, and he was saying lots of young people around here and they haven't got any jobs. I'm like, they're on a direct tube line into the West End. I passed 5 different cafes or, sandwich bars and coffee bars saying desperately needing staff. Why can't they get the train or the bus down into town and get a job? It's only a couple of miles. And, apparently they can't. And you just think, oh, come on. If you want to work, you can get a job. Here's the thing, though. I don't even think they should be entitled to unemployment benefit even at the beginning. I think it's up to parents to make sure your kids got a work ethic. And if they haven't got a work ethic, you're going to be paying for them. I think that might focus minds more.
I think much more. And you just go back, do you remember about 30, 40 years ago, that series, The Boys and the Black Stuff? That was when we were the labourers of Europe, go and get a job in Germany because you couldn't find to get jobs here. That's what you have to go and do. And I'm afraid you have to swallow your pride. You're quite right. Parental discipline, you have to work to go out and participate properly in society. I'm afraid our social support it's a safety net, not a mattress for you to lie on. And to be able to therefore go out and make sure, create some wealth. By the way, when you create wealth, you actually be able to create tax too. Tax does not create wealth. It's the other way around.
It's the other way around. Well, as we now know, because we've got the latest UK government borrowing figures for September, it hit the highest level for the month in 5 years. More pressure on Rachel Reeves ahead of that budget next month. But public sector net borrowing rose to 20.2 billion for the month. It's 1.6 billion higher than September the year beforehand. This is a rising debt interest costs, pay rises, of course, give national insurance extra costs, and of course the inflation, meaning pay rises, and of course a minimum wage going up as well, and general inflation increasing the government's day-to-day running costs. And, of course, our debt repayments going up. We are literally running to stand still. In fact, we're running to go backwards now, aren't we?
You also go back only about 5 years ago, our interest payments on our debt were about 50 billion, which is about the same as our defence, which is rather worrying. It's now over 100 billion. Yeah. That's just before you even actually just get anything else done. That's the interest you've got to pay on your credit card for doing it.
Now, we're not paying anything off.
No, we're not. And it's all we're doing at the moment is that we've been through this fudge of having quantitative easing. But actually what we now have to try and do is, and this is where we do need, as Philip was saying earlier, our Chancellor does need to require a couple of rather useful parts of her anatomy, or my anatomy, and to be able to therefore go out and say, you're right in this budget, it didn't work last time. Items have changed, and therefore I'm changing, just as John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist, said, when facts change, I change. Do you?
Yeah.
And what you should say now is say, actually, I'm going to have to go back on what we said on the manifesto, because all the other taxes are irrelevant. It's basically only going to be income taxes going to be one they can hit broadly. And don't go for a small amount. Make it big. And make it big now. Because
well, I'm not sure the voters are going to like that. But there we are. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Wonderful insight into his past. We're going to talk to the chairman of the Conservative Party, Kevin Honinrake, about this and indeed much more. More from Philip Ingram as well. I'm going to talk to the wonderful Maggie Oliver about the grooming gangs inquiry. Is it being sabotaged or not? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer and you are with Talk. We are the home of common sense. And whether you listen on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, I so appreciate your company. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking about why Labour is being accused of sabotaging the National Grooming Gangs inquiry. Victims and campaigners saying the long-promised inquiry took 4 months to get the Prime Minister to agree to one. Thank you, Elon Musk, for helping with that. But a big blow on Monday when 2 of the survivors of grooming gangs who've been on the liaison panel to help decide on a chair. 4 months, still haven't got a chair of the panel, let alone actually started any investigations. But they claimed they were being silenced, and one claimed that officials wanted to downplay the ethnicity and religious background of perpetrators, even though that was a key reason why A, they were targeting these young girls, and B, why no one actually fought to prosecute them. Also, in a rare win for common sense, the Metropolitan Police, Britain's biggest police force, has said they will no longer investigate non-crime hate incidents to end the practice of officers having to police toxic culture war debates, as you've just been hearing in the news. But they are going to carry on recording those non-crime hate incidents. We'll be talking about that. Plus, the government went too far by limiting the amount of time people were allowed to spend outside during the COVID pandemic. That's what England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, told the COVID inquiry yesterday. Shame he didn't mention it at the time. He and Patrick Vance up to their eyeballs in the lies that we were told. Even stood there at the Downing Street press conferences throughout COVID. Right now, Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, is giving evidence to the inquiry. My blood has been boiling since I first saw him on my screen, and he's basically completely justifying closing schools, not having exams, and saying, oh, how terrible it was. But, they had to, didn't they? Well, apart from the fact that they didn't have to, they knew they didn't have to. They knew it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to COVID spreading. We know this, particularly also because Sweden made that very choice. Other than Italy, we closed our schools for longer than any other country in Europe. And what have we got to show for that? Well, we've got a load of kids who aren't working, a load of kids with mental health problems, physical problems. We've got children starting at school unable to speak properly, not even able to sit upright and hold a pencil because no one gave them any teaching. We had parents who lost their wits trying to teach those children. I mean, frankly, Prime Minister, you've just as I said to my lovely audience about an hour ago, you don't hate that man enough for what he's done to this country. You really don't hate him enough. Philip Ingram is still with me. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. And it's interesting, before we go to our next guest in just a couple of moments, it's very interesting, Philip, isn't it? Conversation we just had about NEETs, the not in education, employment and training, and the massive debt this country is in, both of which also a result of the COVID policy.
Very much so, and the debts, and it's across Europe and in other countries around the world, and other countries have started to deal with it quickly. But our politicians need to recognise where they've made wrong decisions, identify those of the COVID inquiry, so that is formally recorded, so that when this happens again, and it will happen again, that we don't repeat the same things and try and learn the same lessons. That's what government does time after time after time. It never learns lessons, it just re-identifies
Isn't that why
them.
we had pre-pandemic planning? So when the pandemic hit, we would follow the planning because we'd learned all the lessons from previous pandemics. Apparently we'll just throw that out the window and do what China did.
And all of that was ignored completely. Right down to local authorities. Local authorities had local plans for pandemic incidents that were coming in, and all of a sudden it gets thrown out, and then it gets politicised. And this is where, in the schools, one of the big things was the pressure that was coming in from the teaching unions, because they saw this as there's a way of getting political advantage. This is where, again,
and the media.
People need
media.
I'm
really sorry.
To
Mainstream media have so much to answer for. I've taken each individual person I can to task each time. They were having a lovely time. They didn't have to go into Parliament. They were having a lovely time spending time with their kids. Sorry, they didn't care. They didn't care. Simple as that. I'd love to hear from you if you want to give your thoughts on this. We'll talk to a guest, James Melville, keener anti-lockdown campaigner, later in the hour. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on two of the other biggest stories, the sabotaging, as is alleged, of the National Grooming Gangs inquiry, but also Met Police stopping investigating non-crime hate incidents after Graham Linehan's arrest for social media posts about trans activists who were clearly non-criminal and should have merited no police time whatsoever. What's your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. More from Phil coming up. More from you as well, obviously, if you get on the phone lines. First up, though, let's talk to Kevin Hollinrate, Conservative MP and Chairman of the Conservative Party. A very good afternoon to you, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. There's a lot to cover today. Can I just get your quick thoughts, though, on where we are? Boris Johnson giving evidence about the COVID inquiry, and particularly about children. There's been a lot of sort of, oh, isn't it terrible? Wish we hadn't done it, from whether it's Chris Whitty, Gavin Williamson, the former Education Secretary, who I knew for a fact had opposed school closures. I was dealing with him at the time. Boris Johnson basically sort of going, yeah, you know, we made mistakes, but it's what we knew at the time. Yeah, I don't think you were in government at the time, but do you think we need more of a mea culpa, and we actually need that government, the people in that government, to admit that what they did was basically the most damaging things ever been done to this country in peacetime?
Well, yeah, I mean, what we learn from history is you don't learn from history, Julia. We need to make sure we get the inquiry done quickly. I mean, it's 3 years, this inquiry, hundreds of millions of pounds. It's ludicrous. This isn't actually about, I mean, nobody set out to do anything criminal. Nobody set out to do the wrong thing. People tried to make good decisions, basically were flying blind. It was very difficult at the time, but it's very important we learn the lessons and we don't repeat those mistakes in the future, some of which you've been talking about children not being able to go to school, about people not being able to spend time outside. Lots of those things were clearly pointless and had very adverse consequences in lots of young people, particularly, that now don't seem to be able to move into the workplace. So yes, we need this inquiry to conclude and some proper recommendations that we know what to do in the future and we don't make the mistakes of the past.
Well, you've got more faith than I do. I wonder how much faith you've got in the grooming gangs inquiry. Hasn't even actually got to work yet, but a liaison panel has seen 2 resignations from 2 of the women who were on that panel as victims, as survivors of grooming gangs. They've walked away saying, look, basically this process is basically going to be a whitewash, and that they are being silenced. They're being told what questions they should ask of those who are being looked at as potential chairs of this inquiry, and in particular Fiona Goddard and Ellie Ann Reynolds. One of them is pointing out that you're actually looking at people who are head of social services or heading or a senior police officer when those organisations were part of the cover-up of grooming gangs, preventing justice for all those years and not saving those young girls. What do you make of what's going on?
Well, it's just desperately bad for the victims, isn't it? Who've been betrayed time and time again. And, the reality is Keir Starmer and his government had to be dragged kicking and screaming towards this inquiry. Now it's gone into this black hole. Nothing's happening. And the obvious reason for that is they're just not keen to have it. They're trying to water it down. They can't find a chair for it. The victims themselves are leaving the scene because they have no confidence in it. It's chaotic. So, you've got to, if he's going to agree to a proper inquiry, get on with it. Pick somebody good. It needs to be somebody who's used to interrogating witnesses. A judge needs to lead the inquiry, and it needs to be given all the powers it needs to be able to properly understand what went wrong and who's responsible. And there's clearly a religious stroke ethnic minority element to this, and we can't shy away from that because the vast majority of people from those communities are decent people, but we've got to root out the cancer at the core of those communities that feel it's okay for their communities to prey on people from other communities.
And that's it. And it's come out in court cases where some of the perpetrators have been very open about why they chose white girls. But also the key point was, and lots of the concern is about this grooming gang inquiry being extended much wider, and it being therefore able to sort of hide away the fact of we were talking about Muslim Pakistani men, not Muslims from other countries, not Asian men, Muslim Pakistani men from particular communities, largely actually from one particular part of Pakistan. Interestingly, that's emerged. But the key thing there is that if it gets widened, then you can ignore that aspect of it, and the key thing about that aspect is that was the reason why people didn't investigate and why these girls were left to continue to be victims for so long.
Well, that's exactly right. And the only person who's had the courage to be able to say that has been Kemi Badenoch. She talked about this culture has been imported by some very poverty-stricken areas and quite backward areas of Pakistan, and that's been imported into this country. We need to understand exactly what's happened, where this culture now exists within our own communities. We need to root it out, cut it out, and end it. And you're not going to do that until you have a proper inquiry, which is unafraid, which is willing to look into the very dark corners of this whole incident and root out those responsible, and hopefully identify individuals responsible, particularly those who covered it up within with our social services, with our local authorities, maybe within our police forces, but deliberately covered this up because they didn't want the truth to come out. That is horrendous. On behalf of the victims and every other citizen in this country, we need to make sure those people are held to account.
Well, indeed. I mean, a lot of us might say, you guys could have done it when you were Tories, you were in power, you didn't do it. What do you make about non-crime hate incidents? Because one of the things I think people find frustrating is, so they weren't investigating grooming gangs. Apparently you don't investigate phones being stolen. I'm still waiting to find out when the man who's alleged to have stolen my handbag on June last year is actually they're going to bother looking for him to force him to turn up to court. It's an absolute joke what's going on in our criminal justice system right now, in our policing. And yet we have police spending inordinate amounts of time investigating non-crime hate incidents. So they themselves know they're non-crimes. Now, after Graham Linehan's arrest by 5 armed police officers at Heathrow Airport as he got off a plane last month, and the big hoo-ha about that, quite rightly, he's been told yesterday charges will not be brought. Of course they were never going to be brought. He didn't commit a crime. And then we've had the Met Police saying that they are going to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents. However, they're just one of our many police forces. And second, they're going to continue to record them. People may not even know they've got a record on their police record of a non-crime hate incident, even though they've never been questioned about it. Isn't it time that these were abandoned altogether and the heads started rolling in police forces for pushing this?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's completely ludicrous. You know, there's enough crimes going on for the police to be kept very busy investigating them and prosecuting those responsible. Only when that happens will you properly tackle crime in the UK. Can I just say, Julia, just on the grooming gangs, we set up the grooming gangs task force, which arrested 807 people. We did not do nothing on this, but nevertheless, onto the substantive point you make about this. I mean, it is completely ludicrous. Whether it's a combination of our politics and the police, we have lost the plot in terms of making sure that we tackle proper crime, crime that people are really worried about, be it street crime, be it fraud, whatever else it is, domestic abuse, all the terrible crimes that happen in our society, tackle those crimes properly. We could be putting 10,000 more police on the streets. With the advent of AI, we can make sure those police time is spent, much more of that time is spent on the beat. That's where people want to see our police, and properly cracking down on crime, not investigating non-crime. It's completely ludicrous. It's like your bin men coming and collecting your non-rubbish. It's just completely ludicrous.
I mean, it'd be nice if they collected the rubbish. But it is extraordinary. The former Tory Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, in 2023 basically pretty much instructed police forces to stop doing this. They responded by investigating more.
Well, I never think we can hide behind the civil service or our agencies or indeed our police forces. We're in government. It's up to us to make sure things happen, not just that we give an instruction. We make sure it happens. Now, any government, any people in government make mistakes, and we should hold our hands up when we haven't got things right in the past. But what we need is a strong government, a strong leader. That's what I believe we have in Kemi Badenoch.
Doing the chairman's job there.
It's important. We need a strong leader. We've had them in the past. We haven't had one for a while. We need a really strong leader to make sure we tackle some of these issues, because I don't think anything else will make a difference.
Well, here's something
that strong leadership.
I mean, there's an awful lot of mea culpa with the Conservatives whenever we have a Conservative on now. Yeah, we did that wrong, we did that wrong. Among the many things you did wrong was, although the good news of actually sending serious criminals to prison for a longer time, although fewer and fewer people ever actually got arrested or charged and prosecuted, but when they did go to prison, you didn't think that it might be a good idea to build more prisons, certainly enough places. So, I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy for the Labour Party, saying we have been left basically with a big unexploded bomb of no prison places. They're going to be having to see more early release, and yet we've got criticism from the Tories saying the government's going to allow thousands of rapists, child sex offenders and other violent criminals to be released early from prison because there isn't enough space. But I mean, with all due respect, that's your fault, isn't it?
Well, when we left office, we were building prisons at the fastest rate ever, and under our period in office, sorry, my lights have gone off. Under our period in office, we increased the prison population massively because we hit crime harder. Now, I agree with you. there was a shortage of prison places. We should have tackled that earlier. There were plenty of other things going on, but we should have tackled that earlier and hold our hands up and say that. But the reality is we did an awful lot in tackling serious crime. And as you say, stiffer sentences, more people in prison, and that did create this ultimately a shortage of places. But we were building prisons again at a rapid rate, and Labour have got to continue with that, rather than simply letting people out, particularly serious criminals, people who have been guilty of those kind of serious sexual offences you talk about. Really unacceptable. Those people are released.
Well, who should be released then? Because actually, largely, a lot of the people who are on the lower end don't ever end up going to prison in the first place now.
Well, there's more things you can do. There's temporary prison places. You can build nightingale prisons. Let's see some innovation from this government. Rather than blaming everybody else for their failures, get something done.
Well, they say you're blaming everyone else for your failures. You weren't building prisons. You weren't bringing enough prison places, and you weren't building them soon enough. I mean, it was really, really obvious. I mean, genuine and massive underfunding of the criminal justice system under austerity, which has come back to bite us very, very hard in our backsides.
Well, there's some difficult choices you make in government, Julia. The reality is you will point to the fact that this country's deep in debt, and yet at the same time you're saying we had to implement austerity to try and balance the books. Really difficult decisions in government. But the reality is this government's in place over a year. It should have the responsibility of delivering the prison places. There are ways to do that rapidly, and also there are 10,000 foreign national offenders in our prisons that we said we'll deport. Why don't they do that? Okay. Show some backbone. You've not got a leader with backbone. That's what this country needs. So, but it's constantly making excuses because of a previous administration. I don't think that washes with the public at all.
I think it probably still washes a year and a bit in, but I don't think it's going to wash for 5 years, that's true. Just finally, can I ask you about the burqa? Because the Shadow Justice Secretary, your colleague Robert Jenrick, he was asked today about the burqa, and he said, well, he's breaking ranks. He's the first Shadow Cabinet Minister to back a ban on the burqa. There have been calls from Reform MPs, not the official party policy, and also from Tory backbenchers. He said to my colleague Jeremy Carr this morning, I probably would ban the burqa. There are basic values in this country, and we should stand up and defend them. And when you see them fraying at the edges of frankly being completely destroyed, whether it's Sharia courts or wearing the burqa, these are issues we're going to have to confront if we want to build the kind of society we want to hand on to our kids and grandkids. Would you support a ban on the burqa?
Well, he was expressing a personal view. I might express a similar personal view, actually. I think it's very damaging to have that kind of separation in our societies. I think it's not official policy yet. We need to develop our policy properly. Well, we need to develop our policies properly, and that's what Kemi's been very clear on. She's always spoken out about things like first cousin marriages and second cousin marriages indeed, and Sharia councils and hate preachers, that we should ban those. So we need to take a tougher line with these people who want to live a life separate from the rest of society. That is not healthy for our societies. If you go to places like Dewsbury, Bradford, you go to Leicester, Birmingham, parts of London, you see this.
Walk around
it really
the West
is
End.
Not good for our society.
Yeah,
absolutely. It is of real concern. So I think it's a debate we need to have, and a policy we need to develop and decide where we land on this.
Okay.
I can see there are some arguments around liberty, personal liberty, which we believe in as a party, of course, but I think that separation is very, very unhealthy. Okay,
a really good talk. You covered a lot of ground there. Kevin Hollingray, Conservative MP, Chairman of the Conservative Party. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Philip Ingram, I'll let you come back in on whatever you want to comment on.
Well, I have to agree with Kevin on the burqas bit. Is anything that creates a separation in society and doesn't create an inclusiveness. We are known for our tolerance, our inclusiveness. That's the British way of doing things, and we have to make sure that we protect that and stop things that are putting people into little areas where they can be exploited by
It's a political ideological statement, not a statement of religion. It's not a requirement of Islam
it's not
at
a
all.
requirement of Islam.
I mean, I would like to go down the French route, and certainly I don't want girls in college and in school should actually not be allowed even to cover their hair.
Yeah.
I think you actually have to go that far, because you need to make sure that it's a choice that only making as adults.
It's child abuse.
Oh, absolutely. And let's just briefly talk about the early release from prison. It's something that the Tories are pushing right now. I don't like Labour saying, oh, well, it's all the last Tories' fault. I don't know how long they can get away with that, but you can't build prisons in 2 days. I mean,
well, I'll tell you how long they're going to get away with it, because I spoke to someone who's a front bencher before the election,
in which party?
In the Labour Party, and he confessed that they weren't doing any planning, because he said that we can get away with just blaming the last lot for at least 2 to 3 years, and then we will have learned what to do.
Good luck with that. Don't think we're going to fly with that at all. Well, we're going to be talking to somebody who absolutely holds people to account up next. That is the brilliant, the wonderful former Greater Manchester Police Detective Constable Maggie Oliver, who's a major whistleblower when it came to the Rochdale grooming gang scandal. What does she make of what is going on with the National Grooming Gangs Inquiry, which doesn't even have a chair yet, and has now seen 2 of the survivors of grooming gangs remove themselves, resign from the liaison panel, saying the whole thing's basically going to be a whitewash and they're being silenced. We'll talk to her about that up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
This is quite embarrassing for Sadiq Khan, because in view of that abject denial and in fact playing around with words there, it's clear that there is a problem somewhere and that the authorities haven't really reacted to it. And it's much easier to deal with these problems when you accept there is a problem and you get stuck into it and solve it.
Across the UK.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 12:26 is the time. Let's talk more about the grooming gangs inquiry that, well, doesn't seem to be going anywhere after 4 months of being set up. And goodness me, it took enough time to actually basically bully the Prime Minister. That's what had to happen. Elon Musk, thank you for your help on that front to get the Prime Minister to agree to a national public inquiry. We still don't even have a chair. We've now lost 2 members of the liaison panel. They are the survivors of grooming gangs, Fiona Goddard and Ellie and Reynolds, and they basically said, look, they're being silenced. And they don't believe that this is going to be a grooming gangs inquiry, that it's actually going to get to the bottom of things. Let's talk about this with Maggie Oliver. She's a former detective constable with Greater Manchester Police. She resigned to be a whistleblower on the Rochdale grooming gang scandal, and since then has been running the Maggie Oliver Foundation, helping victims of grooming gangs. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us, Maggie.
Thank you, Julia. Here we are again.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no one I trust more on this issue, because, you put your money where your mouth was, you put your career on the line to do the right thing. And my God, there are so many people in this country who should be grateful to you for what you did. What is going on?
Fiona and Eliane, who I know both quite well, they are speaking the absolute truth of what I have been seeing for 4 months. A deliberate attempt to conceal the truth, to water down the remit of this inquiry. The government are... we haven't seen terms of reference. We don't know who the chair is. I see, and I'm receiving messages from people on this panel to say that the government are trying to influence, coerce, whatever you want to say, the survivors to widen the remit of this inquiry so that it's not grooming gangs. Once again, it's any form of group-based abuse.
Yeah. Why would that be an issue? Explain to us why that's an issue.
Because it would detract from the ethnicity and the background of the abusers.
And why does that matter?
Because what I've seen for 20 years, Julia, is a determination to pretend that this kind of child rape by gangs of predominantly Pakistani Muslim men actually doesn't exist in that format when it does. Yeah. And I was, involved in the National Abuse Inquiry. If you remember, we've spoken before, ICSA, led by Alexis J. The organised network strand was a complete whitewash. None of the towns and cities where this occurred were included. Yeah. And what I'm seeing here is another attempt to do the same. And Louise Casey made it crystal clear. I met her twice. She met a group of 10 survivors that I brought together, that the foundation brought together in Manchester, and she delayed publication of her report after hearing their stories.
Can I just clarify for people who aren't so up on this, that Baroness Louise Casey was asked by the Prime Minister to do a rapid review on whether or not there needed to be a public inquiry. I think he would have known she was going to say yes, there would. And she was probably the first person involved in all of this who bothered to meet some survivors, sat in a group with them and had them tell her, with you, what had happened and what they felt was needed to be done. And she listened to them.
Yeah, and she was shocked. Even though she'd been involved in Rotherham, she thought she knew it all. 10 years on, she thought things had changed. They haven't. And she delayed publication of her report. What I would say, Julia, is that in her report, she made it crystal clear that before they even start the audit, they should implement the 20 recommendations of ICSA. 18 of those have still not been implemented.
And what are the key recommendations there that would change things?
That we gather ethnicity of the offenders, that we have a minister for children, that we stop pain compliance techniques in children, that the list goes on, things that the public will assume have been done already. Yeah. They haven't.
Because this is the thing, we have inquiry after inquiry, we're always told, we'll learn the lessons. I mean, genuinely, you can have a drinking game. Oh, they're going to say we're going to learn the lessons. They never do, and loads of these recommendations are never implemented. But this is the key thing. There'll be loads of people all over social media, and you'll get it all over the time, and the politicians who say, look, the majority of sex abusers in this country, in a white majority country, are white. Why are people focusing on this? It's for racist reasons. But the key point is, these people, these men, were not challenged, were not arrested, were not charged. These girls were allowed to continue to be victims because of their ethnicity and because of their religion. There was this overriding view that community cohesion, whatever the hell that is, mattered more, and not being called a racist or an Islamophobe mattered more than stopping girls being gang raped.
Yeah, but that's why, but that's why we are where we are today. And once again, we have got the same willful blindness to try and pretend this isn't going on. But the problem the government have got now is that the whole country knows that it does. Yeah. And these survivors that are now resigning, and those two are not the only two. No. I can tell you that there are more coming. They are being silenced. They're being told to sign NDAs. They're being told...
Non-disclosure agreements. Yeah.
Non-disclosure agreements, not to talk to anybody.
Wait a minute, they were silenced silenced for 20 years, and now they're being silenced again by the very authorities who allowed the authorities to silence them.
Yeah, but they have woken up and they are bravely saying no more. So this is not going to go away. And I said right from the start, it's all right announcing an inquiry. Yeah. Who's going to lead it? What's the terms of reference? My foundation, we've got an umbrella group. None of those have been spoken to. We've not been spoken to. And I'm not bothered. You know, I think it's really telling, though, Julia, as well, that they can't get a judge to chair this. And I'm led to believe now that even the social worker that they'd chosen has resigned. But ICSA, the National Abuse Inquiry, was a platform for police and social workers to say what a fantastic job they're doing. Yeah. The last thing survivors need is another police officer and another social worker to listen to them when they don't trust them even going in. Yeah. So it's a complete... I can't swear.
It's a joke. No, but it's not. I mean, let's be polite. It is a joke. It's an insult.
It's a joke.
But this is the thing. We know that. I mean, we are seeing criminal cases against the men who perpetrated this horrific sexual violence against these girls for years on end. What we want now is to find out why that was allowed to carry on. We can carry on with those criminal cases by all means. We need more of these men being convicted or arrested, charged, then convicted, hopefully. And we need to stop the cover-up of what the hell's going on in London. I want to talk to you about that as well. But crucially, what this inquiry needs to uncover is why it was covered up and why it wasn't tackled. And we know that senior police officers, counsellors, social workers, care workers were all part of the cover-up. So, of course, these young women don't want the organisations that they went to. They said, I'm being gang raped, and those organisations were not that bothered, actually.
Go away.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, I know one of the I don't know if it was Fiona or Eliane, pointing out that at the trial for her, her abusers, the judge actually wouldn't allow anyone on the panel of jurors who was a social worker or a teacher or involved in the police, because they couldn't be completely neutral, because there would be criticism of their own organisations. And yet they're suggesting one of these people as the chair of the inquiry. That's madness.
It's crazy, but it's like the lunatics are running the asylum for me. I've been in this, cesspit for 20 years. It's not news to me. I have been fighting for 15 years. Yep. But now the country knows what I knew 10, 15 years ago. And the survivors are finding their voice and they are fighting back. And, we need, I wanted Louise Casey to lead this.
I think she'd be perfect, yes.
I think she would.
She absolutely tells the truth, doesn't she?
Yeah. And I don't think Keir Starmer for one single second expected her to do a report that would demand this inquiry.
Oh, really?
So, no, I don't. I think it came as a complete shock. And I think that the turning point for Louise Casey was when she met that group of survivors. And some of the things that she heard on that day when we were in Manchester made her toes curl. You could see her face fall.
Can you tell us what it was? Because this was all kind of public knowledge, and she's a very, very knowledgeable, very successful woman. She's been brought in to do lots of different inquiries for the government. She's got a very strong track record. What did she hear that she didn't already know?
Well, I think what the problem is that many people who are in positions of authority or power never get on the ground floor and speak to the people. They are always filtered the information through somebody who has got an agenda. What I did and what the foundation did, we brought together the real people. So we had Eliane, and Eliane's family were in that room at the time. They were one of the families. Jade, who went to prison, can't even go and, on a school trip with her children. Her abusers are all walking the streets. Yeah. She can't get a job with vulnerable people or in a care home. They are real lives that have been destroyed. And the police and social services have criminalised and blamed these young women, and they've silenced them and they've judged them.
They called them sluts and prostitutes.
I was just going to say, you're making a lifestyle choice, and I always say, I know I've said it to you before, Julia, but if this was Keir Starmer's daughter, or Chief Constable Peter Foy, who wouldn't speak to me, who described himself as a good Christian with 3 daughters. If these were your daughters, and your 12-year-old daughter was being raped on a daily basis, would you think it was okay to turn away? I would say no, but I don't know what planet these people live on, because they should hang their heads in shame for what they have done. And this inquiry is another example of complicity and corruption, in my opinion, cover-ups, condescendingly silencing these witnesses, these survivors, trying to get them to sign non-disclosure agreements, not to talk about what's really happened. Well, you know what? We need the truth. Once and for all, get a proper inquiry that tells the truth. Deal with it
and then act on it. And then
act on it.
Well, I mean, they're not going to walk away from this while Maggie Oliver's still got any breath in her lungs. That's for darn sure, Maggie. Can I ask you just finally about London? Because I've been saying this for quite a long time. I just find it quite bizarre. There's what are we up to, like 55 different towns and cities around the country where this has been at least, exactly. But miraculously, London, not an issue whatsoever. We've even had Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, basically poo-pooing this idea. We've had allegations in front of the Express yesterday saying, look, even the reports which the Sadiq Khan, as the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Mayor of London, that he's actually had to see these reports where they've got, some allegations about grooming gangs, some victims. OK, we're in single-digit numbers, but of course it was single-digit numbers for the first time girls talked in Rochdale and Rotherham and everywhere else. What do you think is going on in London?
Well, I actually worked with Zach and the Express on that story, and I went in and I looked at the documentation that they had received, which actually you've got to remember, Julia, that is what is already in the public arena. Yeah. They can't see what's not in the public arena. And, if you ask for the data, it doesn't exist because they don't collate it. But, everybody saw Sadiq Khan being, hauled over the ashes by Susan Hall at the beginning of the year, where he wouldn't even answer a question.
He was very rude as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think the time's up, I think the time has come where London, I said in the article, is really the last bastion that has been able to kind of wriggle out accountability for failures towards children who have been abused by grooming gangs. I think that time is up. And the Met, they 24 hours after the deadline for their right to reply to that story, did a complete 180-degree turnaround and acknowledged they do have problems. And then can you believe that they said they have been ordered to look at 1,200 historical cases. Wow. This is from a force that says they didn't have a problem, and that is only what they are disclosing.
Yeah.
So
that'll be the tip of the iceberg.
It is. So the country needs action, and we are not. I've been saying this for a long time as a lone voice, but now we've built an army. People like you, Julia, keeping the spotlight on, keeping the pressure up. I believe it's only public. It's people power that will change this.
Well, I tell you what, you've done a great service for the young women that you represent and the girls that they were that abused. I think you've done a great service for this country. I absolutely salute you. And I say, well, there's breath in Maggie Oliver's body. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Maggie Oliver, always great to talk to you. I mean, really, it was always an honour to talk to you. I've got to be honest with you. Thank you very much indeed. Philip Ingram, I'm sure you'd want to come back in on that.
Yeah, so much common sense coming out. The only thing I will say is when it comes to the chair of the inquiry, whoever it is, it needs to be the right person, and it shouldn't be automatically excluding people who are social workers, who are former police officers, who are something else, because then you start excluding anyone else and you're labelling them just because.
I think you need to have someone who's got a very clear track record of being plain speaking and of speaking truth to power.
Correct.
They need that track record more than anything else.
Yes, they do, but it's the right person to chair it, and someone who can add,
but it's quite telling.
Proper value.
4 months, they can't find someone.
Well, exactly.
4 months. Come on, something's going on. They're dragging their feet. They want this all to go away. They certainly don't want any. They don't want any interim reports before 2029. Anyway, 12:40 is the time. We'll take a break, and then we're going to hear from you. Lots of calls coming in. We're also going to be talking more about the COVID inquiry. That man Boris Johnson still giving evidence. So we're going to talk to James Melville Keane, anti-lockdown campaigner, about what we've heard this morning. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:43 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. Lots coming in about, well, we're talking about Boris Johnson, the COVID inquiry. We'll guest James Melville on that in a few moments as well. But also the grooming gangs. I have to say, Maggie Oliver is just... she's just such an absolute heroine of mine. She really, really is. Let's talk to Michael. He's on the line, 0344 499 1000. He's in London on grooming gangs. Michael, what do you want to say?
Oh, hi, Julia. Just a quick one, really. I'm a middle-aged white man. I've got 6 young grandchildren, all under the age of 9. And what's happening in this country is a disgrace, you know what I mean? I mean, this grooming gang scandal has been going on for donkey's years. It's been covered up. Yep. We're importing mass rapists over here all the time. It goes on all the time, which never gets reported.
Yep.
We hear loads and loads going on, and all we hear about is COVID inquiries. Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia. Do you know what? I don't care about any of that. I don't care about it.
I care about all of it. I think we've got the bandwidth.
We need to deal with our own stuff first. We need to sort this country out first, then worry about the rest of the world.
Yeah, the only thing is, one of the reasons we're in a big mess we're in is because of COVID policy. Our energy prices are sky high because of what happened in Ukraine. We're having, riots on, we're having marches on the streets and violence on the streets because of what's happened in the Middle East. I think they're all related. I really think they're all related.
What you're saying about the grooming gangs was going on well before any of this happened.
True. That's true.
You know what I mean? So let's sort out our own house first, because I worry about my grandchildren's future. And what's going to happen is, it's going to kick off over this country so bad, because this is going to happen to the wrong person, and I can feel it boiling over. I speak to my friends, I speak to other people. Something's going to happen, it's going to ignite a spark, and people are going to start dying in the street over this, because you can already see the sectarianism.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I'm with you. I think this is going to explode at some point. They haven't got a clue what's coming. I want us to always resolve things with words and through the ballot box, but I really don't think that the people who've been in charge the last few years and currently have a clue what us ordinary people are thinking. Michael, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Got a few messages I want to read out. Isla says, I know the perfect people to head up this inquiry, Maggie Oliver and Peter Blexley. Yeah, absolutely, take both of those. Lorraine says, didn't we all expect this was all going to be damage control, talking about the grooming gangs inquiry, a cover-up of the cover-up. But those survivors who courageously took the decision to put themselves through even more trauma by actively engaging are the only ones that count, and yet again, Britain has let them down. Peter says they're protecting their own. If the truth comes out, it seems like a lot of Labour councillors, police and any other abuser will face prison, and rightly so. And Michael says the establishment is doing its best to keep the truth suppressed. And Christian says, if this isn't looked at properly and really investigated in depth, it will solve nothing. The public knows what went on. Community tensions will only rise with every future case. Treat it like a cancer. Cut it out now before it's too late. I mean, couldn't agree with all of that more. Could you, Philip?
No, not in the slightest. And unfortunately, it's not just in this area. It's across government as well. I've been involved in some issues that have gone through the Ministry of Defence with things that are there, and the reports that have come out of the Ministry of Defence have all been cover-up. It's all been trying to protect the government department.
And it's always the cover-up that gets you in trouble.
Than the victim, and they always attack the victims. And that's the
absolutely. Well, let's talk about victims. Victims of Boris Johnson. He's giving evidence to the COVID inquiry, and just making my blood boil today, I have to say, about this is particularly the part of the COVID inquiry looking into the impact on children and their schooling, their physical and mental impact. Caroline is in London and wants to have her say. Hi, Caroline.
Julia, hi. OK, I'll be as quick as I can. When you were speaking, I had to pull my car over because my blood was just literally going through the roof.
I had a bit of a rant earlier, if you're tuning in, about how you don't hate Boris Johnson enough.
Well, I'd like to add to that rant, OK? We are being run, and we have been for a long time, by criminals. And they hide behind that being an MP, a judge, a police officer. We are literally being run by criminals. We have Sadiq Khan, who's lied all this way about the grooming gangs in London. The Labour Party are lying about doing an inquiry. They have got no intention. We are being lied about. Mandelson is still getting his £174,000 pension. We're being lied about Starmer, the people that Starmer protected before he became PM, terrorists. I mean, I could write a book, and you
Who
could
do you mean by
probably write
that?
3 books.
The terrorists that Starmer protected?
Zia Yusuf did a really interesting post, and another guy did a lot of.
You're talking about as a barrister.
Yes.
Okay, been representing clients. Okay,
Sorry,
right. Okay.
Yeah, and that was his choice, and I'm actually going to send them to you on your tweet.
Okay.
If I may.
Yeah.
We are literally being run by criminals, and we are being literally treated worse than slaves. When are you and me and the British going to say no more? We're not paying any tax until this country has been cleaned up. These grooming gangs is beyond. I don't have words. I've got no children. I've got a niece. It is so thick and so dark, and I don't even think even Maggie Oliver knows the depths of it. Yeah. I think it's so deep, and it's disgusting, and I'm ashamed to be British.
I know, it is just extraordinary that it's gone on for so long, and they're still trying to cover it up. Caroline, I can feel the anger, I feel your pain. Caroline, thank you for that. 12:49 is time to take a quick break. Then we're going to talk to anti-lockdown campaigner James Melville about what Boris Johnson, our dear former leader, has been telling us at the COVID inquiry. I'm going to guess it's all porky pies. Same as usual. This is Talk.
And as you raise your gun to protect yourself or the people that are in the vicinity, you're worried that you're going to spend 3 to 5 years being investigated and ultimately being taken from your family and thrown in prison. It's a complete joke.
Yeah, that cannot be in your mind when you're thinking about how to protect your safety as the police officer, the safety of your colleagues, and the safety of the public. You cannot have that second thought, because that is going to delay and cloud your judgment. So I think it's quite an important intervention.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:52 is the time. Well, pretty much the whole time we've been on air. Boris Johnson has been answering questions at the COVID inquiry, particularly about school closures. This comes after evidence from Gavin Williamson, the former Education Secretary. Last week, basically said this was sprung on him and it wasn't something he supported. And I know that certainly that's what he was saying behind closed doors at the time. But also we've had Chris Whitty, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer of England, telling the inquiry inquiry yesterday that rules about going outside, particularly for children, were too strict. If only they'd known that at the time, even though they did know perfectly well it was perfectly safe for children to be outside, indeed anyone else. If your blood isn't boiling, I don't know why, but I'm sure it will after hearing from James Melville, a keen anti-lockdown campaigner who joins us right now. Good afternoon to you, James.
Hi, Julia, you well?
No, I'm not today because Boris Johnson is on my telly in the background, and my blood has been boiling since I've seen some of the first comments. Yet again, and this has happened with pretty much every cabinet minister, every advisor, everyone who's come on or to give evidence throughout this COVID inquiry, is they always say, oh, we did our best at the time, or we were doing our best, it was based on the evidence at the time, if only we know now what we knew then. But that's all a lie, isn't it?
It is. Remember, follow the science?
Yeah.
This wasn't follow the science. This was following political agendas and also panic. And many of us warned about this back in the time on a number of different fronts about collateral damages, of which mental health was front and centre of that. In particular, you did it, I did it. We were focusing on the welfare of children a lot. You shut down the schools for about 18 months on off. The impact in terms of educational deficits, mental health, social exclusion and isolation, not seeing their friends, not doing clubs, a talent deficit as well when kids weren't performing or doing the sports, whatever. It was, and also the mental health figures back this up. You know, 1 in 5 children are suffering from mental health issues now. That's an enormous increase since COVID. And we warned about this, and we were accused of being cranks and conspiracy theorists for pointing out the obvious on the most humane aspect, the welfare of children, and with the most inhumane response. And it's very easy for the likes of Whitty and Johnson to go a little bit mea culpa and say, well, you know, we've maybe got that wrong. That's not good enough. Too little, too late.
Absolutely.
And there's a generation of kids who have paid the price for this, and in some ways will never recover. There's the economy, the cost of living crisis and so on, but the welfare of the kids is one of the most inhumane aspects of that entire
Boris
nonsense.
Johnson, I mean, I could cry even hearing it, what you're saying, but Boris Johnson said children paid a huge price to protect society. What sort of society asks children to pay the price to save some people in their 80s and 90s? I had family members who were being, supposed to be protected. My former GP mother who was saying, among others, I don't want to be protected, thank you very much. And those people could have stayed in and been protected without any child missing school. And you know as well as I do, we have a controlled scientific experiment. Sweden did not close their schools. No child under 16 missed a single day of school. They kept society open. People were not locked down. Some people chose to withdraw from society, but it was all a matter of choice, other than major big events, large crowds. And they suffered fewer COVID deaths, fewer other deaths. Their health service wasn't knocked out, their education system wasn't damaged, and their economy wasn't damaged. The proof is in the pudding, and all they did was follow the pre-pandemic planning that we also had the same stuff, and we didn't follow it.
Completely agree. I mean, I used Sweden as a bit of the lightning rod in all of this, and the figures over time backed up Sweden's response. It was in the round the lowest excess deaths in Europe, over that 3-year period.
By a long way.
Correct.
And lower than other Scandinavian countries, because people always say, oh, Sweden's so different from us. No, other Scandinavian countries, they were lower than them.
Yeah, completely. And they also kept their economy open as well. I've often said that the cost of living crisis is actually, in some ways, the cost of lockdowns crisis. People don't want to talk about it. They want to blame Brexit. It's not. It was happening in terms of the economic damage happening in other countries as well. It's nothing to do with Brexit. It's to do with lockdowns, supply chains, the closure of businesses, the schools, the lack of, circular economies, all of that stuff. But for me, actually, the worst aspect of the whole thing, going back to what we're talking about, is the lack of consideration of welfare of our children.
Even down to putting them in masks all day because Nicola Sturgeon had done it in Scotland.
Well, as a father of kids who were going through that, I saw the impact. My kids are resourceful and wonderful and the rest of it, but they all had an impact because they weren't seeing their friends. They weren't getting taught properly. There's also hundreds of thousands of children, state school kids, who did not have the access to learning. They didn't have the ways and means of technology to learn. They dropped off a cliff in terms of education.
Yeah, I have friends who live in leafy suburbs who got one email a week from the school and no work. I mean, people think it's just the kids in the high-rise blocks. This was just off the scale, an absolute disaster. I'm never going to forgive them. I will never forgive them. It will never not make my blood boil. But the worry is that a lot of people just want it all to go away. It was in the past, it never happened. But the reality is, if we don't learn lessons, and we're not going to learn them from this COVID inquiry, we can make damn sure of that. It's complete whitewash. The questions they ask even are useless. Is that we'll do the same thing again.
Well, this is the most important part, Julia, is to make sure voices like your own, my own, and many, many others who are calling this out for a number of years and continue to raise this issue is because of one fundamental aspect. We do not want this to ever happen again. Absolutely. In my opinion, and many others, it was the worst, most disastrous public health and social policy by any government in living memory.
I'm with you. I'm with you. James Melville, thank you. And thank you for your work you did publicising the madness of all this during lockdowns. Philip Ingram, your response to that?